Hey there, and welcome to Weeb Novel Audiobook, your hub for epic fanfics, original stories, and thrilling adventures brought to life. Make sure to subscribe for regular updates and swing by my Patreon for early access and exclusive mature content. Now, sit back and enjoy the journey.
Chapter 60, You look beautiful when you smile. Take cough cough. As soon as the thick dust entered her nasal cavity and was inhaled into her lungs, Iora began coughing violently. Her breathing was affected immediately, and even her movements slowed down. Seeing this, the dust demon's childlike face twisted into a cruel grin. He sneered, "You demon slayers, once you inhale dust, your strength weakens. That much, Kakik, I do know. So how about it? Can you still move now?" Cough cough. Iora could only keep coughing, unable to answer. She tried to reach for the face scarf that had fallen to the ground, but the dust demon moved even faster. The swirling dust condensed into the shape of a giant hand and swept toward Iora. If it hit, it would likely incapacitate her, even if only temporarily. So Iori had no choice but to dodge. Forcing herself to take deep breaths despite the discomfort of dust flooding her nose and mouth, Iora quickly changed direction, narrowly avoiding the dust demon's sweeping strike. But she could only dodge once; she wouldn't be able to avoid the second time. The dust demon's next attack was already hidden behind the first. No, it wasn't exactly hidden, it had always been there. It was just that the cave was too dim and the dust had obscured her vision, so Iori hadn't noticed it right away. No matter how good your eyesight is, it's useless when your vision is blocked. So, Iori was struck. Bang. Ugh. Bloop. Her body slammed hard against the wall. A hot sensation surged in her throat, and she coughed up a mouthful of blood mixed with the dust she had inhaled. But she had no time to worry about her injuries, because the dust demon's next attack was already coming. "What's the matter, huh? Weren't you all acting so tough just now? What about now? Still think you're better than me?" The dust demon controlled two massive arms made of compacted dust, swinging them down at Iora again and again as he shouted. Iora didn't respond. She couldn't respond. Forcing herself to breathe in the midst of choking dust while dodging the dust demon's attacks, that was already the limit of what she could manage right now. If she opened her mouth to speak, she'd break her breathing rhythm, her movements would slow down, and she'd lose her edge. She would get hit by the dust demon. With her current physical condition, if she got struck even one more time, she feared she might not have the strength to stand back up. So right now, what Iori had to do was not get hit. She had to use every last ounce of her strength to keep dodging and then, wait for Takeo to arrive. Her breathing grew more labored by the second. Iora could feel her lungs getting heavier. The dust created by the dust demon was part of his own blood demon art. Even if he couldn't manipulate it with extreme precision, he could control how it accumulated. The more Iora breathed, the more dust gathered inside her body. How much longer can I hold out? Iora couldn't help but wonder. Sure, she had said she could stall the dust demon, but that was assuming she could still breathe properly. Now that even breathing had become a struggle, she wasn't sure how much longer she could endure. A sudden wave of regret swept over her for not wearing a jacket, and for leaving all her belongings outside the cave. But there was nothing she could do about that now. Jackets and luggage only hindered movement, and for someone like Iori, whose strength wasn't especially high, even the slightest hindrance could lead to fatal consequences. Wearing only the Demon Slayer Corps uniform to maximize her mobility had, in truth, been the right choice. After all, who could have predicted they'd run into such a troublesome demon? Her body felt heavier and heavier. Iora could sense that she was probably no longer even capable of performing the forms of breathing techniques. And it was at that very moment that the dust demon found an opening. A dust whip appeared out of nowhere and caught her by the ankle. That single grab threw her off balance. Her body spun like a child's tossed yo-yo, slamming hard against the rock wall once more. Spulch! Something pierced her body. It was a jagged spike protruding from the cave wall. The spikes weren't particularly sharp to begin with, but at the speed she was moving, even a dull point was enough to break through flesh. Iora felt, something in her torso had been pierced. The intense pain surged through her mind, turning her vision black. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating. This time, I really might die. The Sakuma family, Iora's family, ran a small snack shop in town. Her family would take the rice and flour they bought and turn them into all sorts of different pastries, then deep fry them into delicious snacks. Rice crackers were just one of many kinds of treats made by the Sakuma family. But they were Iora's favorite and also the snack she was best at making. Why she liked them? Iora couldn't really say. But sometimes, it's just like that. There doesn't need to be a reason for liking something, right? It's enough to simply know that you like it. Maybe one day, she'd come to dislike them. But that was something for the future. For now, Iora still loved them. Iori had an older brother and an older sister. Both of them adored her, always saving the best things, the tastiest snacks, just for her. Later, Iora gained a younger brother 3 years younger than her, and very cute. When he was just born, he didn't look very good. His little face was all wrinkled, like a tiny old man. But soon, his skin became smooth and soft, and he grew more and more adorable, someone Iora couldn't help but love. His arrival didn't take away any of the affection the family gave to Iora. They loved him just as much, but they never forgot or neglected her. The happy days continued. That happiness accumulated little by little, day after day. And then, just as it reached its peak, it all came crashing down. Iori remembered clearly the day her happiness shattered. The moon that night was distant, and blood red. As if it were foreshadowing some great misfortune. That night, her father hadn't come home, even though it was very late. The whole family stayed up, worried about his safety, and no one went to bed early. But because it got too late, both Iora and her youngest brother, being the youngest, couldn't stay awake and eventually drifted off to sleep. And then, they were jolted awake by the sound of screaming. "Darling, what are you doing?" "No. Ah." Their mother's scream was shrill, piercing, unbearable. It forced Iora's eyes open, and what she saw froze her in place. The father who used to gently pat her head, give her snacks, and tell her to grow up strong and healthy, that kind, loving father, was now hunched over their mother like a beast, tearing into her neck with his teeth. Blood spurted from her mother's throat, splashing across Iora's face, leaving her standing there in complete shock. She froze, her body stiff, unable to move a muscle. And that perhaps was the greatest regret of her life. Because her older brother died protecting her, slaughtered under her father's claws. Her older sister, trying to lead them to safety, was caught and killed as well. Even her younger brother. The first thing he did upon being woken by the noise was try to protect Iora, his older sister. He was slashed by their father's sharp claws, his small body torn open. It was only then that Iora finally remembered to run. Not that she didn't escape, she just thought she should have run earlier. If she had done so, then maybe, just maybe, her little brother wouldn't have been hurt. And maybe, he wouldn't have died later on. The one who saved Iora in the end was a nearby demon slayer. He was a retired slayer, with one leg missing and no left arm, but even so, he effortlessly subdued the demon and decapitated it. That was when Iora first learned about the Demon Slayer Corps and decided to become a demon slayer herself. She took her younger brother to a cultivator. With the cultivator's help, she began training. And she began doing everything she could to try and save her brother. But in the end, her younger brother didn't survive that summer. "Onisan, I don't like it when you frown like that. You look beautiful when you smile. That was the last thing her little brother said before he passed away. And from that moment on, Iori, who had lost her smile along with her family, began to smile again. All the way up to now. Why, was she suddenly remembering all this? As the scenes of the past played out before her eyes, Iori found herself wondering why these memories were resurfacing now. It was probably that thing people talked about, that life flashing before your eyes moment before death. Iori understood then. She was probably really about to die. But she couldn't die just yet because she hadn't stopped this demon. Sakuma. The demon here was a clone. Stay where you are and don't go any further. Stay vigilant. The demon must be hiding further in your direction. I'm coming, so just try to hold your position and don't let it escape. Takeo's echo rang out from far away. The sound brought a flicker of light back into Iori's eyes. But that faint light quickly scattered again. Because Iori saw it, the dust demon, who had just been preparing to deal her the final blow, suddenly stopped his attack. He looked like he was about to flee. No. He can't be allowed to escape. If they let him get away here, then everything, the efforts of the demon slayers who came before them, Takeo's efforts, her efforts, would all be for nothing. But, if Takeo arrives, she might be saved. Maybe she wouldn't die. Smack. Just as that thought crossed her mind, Iori slapped herself hard across the face. She'd already been saved so many times. By her brother. By her sister. By her little brother. By that demon slayer. Again, and again, and again. But none of that was luck. Iori couldn't treat it as if she'd been lucky. And she especially couldn't treat other people coming to save her as something she could just expect. Move, Iori. Move. She couldn't let him run, not under any circumstances. Even if it meant dying, she absolutely couldn't let this demon escape. That's what it meant to be a member of the Demon Slayer Corps. Think. Think of a way. There has to be something she can do. The dust demon's blood demon art was tied to dust. The dust he generated moved almost as if it had a will of its own, making it incredibly difficult to deal with. Then how could she stop him from producing more dust? Water. Iori thought of a possibility. Water. If dust is absorbed into water, it can't stay airborne. Iori needed to find a way to flood the area with water. And she already had a plan. She had noticed earlier that one section of the cave wall was damp. It was likely due to last night's heavy rain, suggesting that behind that wall, water had accumulated, or if luck was on her side, it might even be an underground river awakened by the storm. Break through that rock wall, and let the water rush in. The idea hit her in a flash. Iori took a deep breath, then dropped from where she had been pinned to the wall. Ignoring the dust still hanging thick in the air, she gasped hungrily, drawing in as much oxygen as her lungs could handle. Water. Her body trembled. Her life was slipping away. Breathing. But Iori ignored it all. 10th form, she summoned every last bit of her strength, forced her breath through her entire body, and unleashed the form she had never managed to master before: constant flux. ______________ O, Red 12 Advanced Chaps Patreon, Horny FBI Chapter 61, 61, Wolf breathing 5th form. Her body spun again and again. With each turn and movement, she built up the force of the technique, stacking momentum until it culminated in a single, devastating blow. At the final moment, Iori grasped the essence of the 10th form. Her body surged through the dust-filled air, and from the flow of water spinning with her Nichiren sword, a long, serpentine water dragon took shape, rushing straight toward the dust demon. From the outside, it looked like she was trying to block his escape. Damn it! You think you can stop me, woman? The dust demon turned around and whipped up a massive cloud of dust to blind her vision, but Iori had already closed her eyes. She had long since locked onto where she needed to strike. The target was so large that she didn't need her eyes to confirm it. Her spinning form tore through the air, and the water dragon burst through the swirling dust like it was nothing. As it surged toward him, the dust demon panicked. His dust surged even faster, aiming to retreat into the wall behind him. That red-haired brat's strength was too terrifying. The dust demon didn't dare trust the protective shell around his neck to hold against an attack like that. He had to flee first, and figure things out later. What he hadn't expected was that Iora's burst of speed would surpass even his own. She reached the wall before the dust demon could. The blade, wrapped in the roaring head of a water dragon, was raised high and came crashing down toward the dust demon. No. The dust demon couldn't dodge in time. He watched in horror as the blade came down on him, but in the very next second, he heard a sharp crack. The Nichiren sword passed by his body and slammed into the rock wall beside him, shattering it. As the dust demon let out a sigh of relief, he couldn't help but sneer, "What are you swinging at?" "As you can see." Iora smiled, stepping forward to grab him by the collar. With her other hand, she drove the sword deeper into the already broken wall. "I'm breaking the wall." The dust demon froze. It was only then that he realized Iori hadn't missed. Her target was shhhhhhh. The sound of trickling water began to flow from the cracked wall. At first it was just a small stream, but within a second, the flow swelled, and then huge chunks of the wall began to collapse. In just a few seconds, the accumulated water behind the wall broke through completely. The dust demon finally realized, Iora's real target had been the underground waterway behind the rock. A normally dry underground river had filled with rainwater from last night's storm, and she had just unleashed it. The rock wall the dust demon had constructed seemed to have originally been part of the underground river. When the water flow was low, it didn't matter, but now, with the increased current, the wall had blocked off one side, causing the water to build up more and more. Now that Iori had shattered it, the pent-up flood immediately found an outlet. In just a moment, it broke through the wall and surged in, engulfing both of them. "You damn woman! Are you trying to die too?" The dust demon was swallowed by the flood, and patches of his body darkened places where the dust clinging to him had been soaked and saturated by the water. He roared furiously at Iori, who clung tightly to him. His sharp claws gripped her wrists, trying to fling her off. But Iora's hands were like iron chains locked onto him with unshakable strength, not moving an inch no matter how violently he struggled. "Ah, phew!" Taking a deep breath, Iora, after having done all this, finally shouted toward the direction of Takeo's voice, "Takeo! Over here!" Just like the first time they met, Iora called out to Takeo not as a cry for help, but as a signal. And, as always, Takeo didn't disappoint her. In fact, Takeo had never once disappointed anyone. As long as he was there, people could feel at ease because in the end, he would kill the demon. Just like when Iora first met Takeo. A rushing wind howled through the cave, carrying with it the faint echo of a wolf's cry. Takeo's figure tore through the darkness like a flash of white lightning. That white lightning was surrounded by the shadow of a wolf, like a starving beast lunging at its prey. In the blink of an eye, it reached the dust demon. "No. It's too fast." The dust demon, who had tried to turn his body into dust and phase into the wall, suddenly realized because of the water he couldn't. The moisture had soaked his entire body, preventing the transformation. To phase into the wall, he needed to make contact with it using his arm. But it was too late. All he could do was use the last of his strength to reinforce the protection around his neck. It would be fine, it had to be fine. No one could cut through it. Not even the strongest of the demon slayers from yesterday could break his neck defense. Their blades had snapped against it. This brat wouldn't be able to either. Clang. The sound of a blade being deflected rang in his ears. The demon's heart lifted in joy. As expected, he couldn't cut through it. In that case, it would soon be his turn to attack. That arrogant brat who dared to look down on him, he'd make sure to wolf breathing. Fifth form. A low, heavy voice laced with anger and a trace of killing intent escaped from the red-haired boy's lips. The dust demon froze. Then, in the next instant, he felt an overwhelming barrage of strikes hit both sides of his neck at once. Swoosh. It was as if multiple identical slashes had overlapped at a single point, raining down simultaneously on his neck from both sides. He had no time to react. Two Nichiren swords slashed through his neck from left and right, cleanly severing his head. Wait, two swords. The dust demon suddenly realized something. He turned his gaze toward Iora and saw that, at some point, the sword that had been in Iora's hand was now in the red-haired boy's. Takeo was now wielding two blades. Eightfold Fang. The boy roared like a howling wolf, his twin Nichiren swords crisscrossing in a lethal arc, sending the demon's head flying through the air. This time, it wasn't a clone. It was the real body. Beheaded? I, who was about to become one of the 12 Kazuki, actually had my head cut off by someone. No, impossible. Damn it. Why? Why did you do this? You executioner. You murderer. I just wanted to make those who looked down on me pay. Why did you stop me? The dust demon's severed head floated in the water, his voice shrill with impotent rage. Iora, now being held in Takeo's arms, barely managed to open her eyes. She looked toward the demon's head, drifting with the current, slowly dissolving. And softly, she said, "No one looked down on you. From beginning to end, that was just what you believed." The dust demon's half-disintegrated face froze in place. Perhaps it was because he was close to death that his memories returned. For the first time in a long while, he remembered who he had been and how he had ended up like this. Yes. He remembered it all. He remembered being scolded by his parents for doing something wrong, being reprimanded by the parents of the girl he liked after pushing her over, running away from home over trivial things, and eventually, becoming a demon. Because he didn't want to admit he was at fault, he had convinced himself from the beginning that it was others who looked down on him. His parents looked down on him. The girl he liked looked down on him. Even after becoming a demon, he believed the other demons looked down on him. But in truth, that wasn't the case. What that girl said was right from beginning to end. No one had looked down on him. It was only himself, who had always believed that they did. It had always been like that. The dust demon's head dissolved into nothing in the water. Takeo didn't spare him a glance. The water around them was rising fast. He carried Iora on his back, heading for higher ground as quickly as possible, calling out to her the whole time, "Hey! Sakuma, don't pass out. Hang in there. Ah, cough cough." Having slain the demon and spent all her strength, Iora answered softly near Takeo's ear. She coughed a few times, expelling some of the dust from her lungs, and pressed her mouth close to his ear. "You, really are amazing. Is now really the time to say that?" "No, I'm just thinking, cough cough, if I had talent like yours, maybe I wouldn't be in such a pathetic state right now." It was a heartfelt sentiment, genuine admiration and envy from Iora. If she had the same talent and strength as Takeo, then maybe she could have killed the dust demon herself. Maybe even, if she'd had that kind of talent and power from the beginning, her family wouldn't have died either. __________________ Red 12 Advanced Chaps P at Trian, Horny FBI Chapter 62. Ordinarily, unremarkably, talent is an unreasonable thing. What some people can't grasp in a lifetime comes as naturally as breathing to others. Sakuma Iora was not a particularly gifted swordswoman. She had trained under her cultivator grandpa for 3 full years before finally gaining the qualification to participate in the final selection. And even then, she still hadn't fully mastered the forms of breathing techniques. Maybe it was because she hadn't worked hard enough. Maybe she'd taken the wrong path. Or maybe, her cultivator hadn't been that good at teaching. Whatever the reason, Sakuma Iori was weak. That much was undeniable. And so, she was always the one being saved. Saved by her family. Saved by a demon slayer. Saved by a younger boy she'd met on the road, someone even younger than herself. After being saved so many times, even Iori started to wonder if maybe, she was just lucky. But luck runs out eventually. And today, her luck had run dry. You know. I don't think I ever told you this, cough cough. I have a little brother. Iori suddenly whispered this near Takeo's ear. Wading with difficulty through the rising water, Takeo felt a sudden chill creep up his spine the moment he heard her voice. He didn't know why, but something about it made him feel cold. It had to be the temperature of the underground water, he thought. It was just too cold, that's why he felt like this. That's what Takeo told himself. But even so, his voice trembled slightly as he spoke. Don't talk right now. Save your strength. We're going to the surface. The sun will be rising soon. Support is on the way. We just get to the surface. We'll be okay up there. My little brother, he's the same age as you. Sakuma Iori continued speaking as if she hadn't heard him, her voice soft and distant, so small, so cute. Always sticking close to me, like a little shadow. Back then, to be honest, I found him kind of annoying, because he was always popping up at the worst times. I hated that. Iori. But later, once I got used to it, I started to think, he was really cute, always running after me, calling out "Ne-san. Iori-ne." And whatnot. I used to think, he'd call me that for the rest of my life, but, accidents always come so suddenly, don't they? Sakuma Iori suddenly smiled. Her cheek pressed even closer against Takeo's, and her breathing began to steady. Her voice, too, became calm. With a soft smile, she asked, I haven't heard him call me that in a long time. Hey, Takeo, can you call me Ne-san just once? I'll give you all the rice crackers I made. Takeo didn't respond at first. He bit his lower lip, took a deep breath, and tried to keep his voice steady. Then he smiled, forced though it was, and said to Iori, Ne-san. Iori responded softly. No sarcasm, no teasing, no sharp edge to Takeo's voice this time. Just a quiet, sincere reply, and that alone was enough for her. She took a breath, lifted her hand, and gently placed it on Takeo's head, lightly stroking his hair, stroking it with love. Then she whispered by his ear, Thank you, for everything, all this time. As she spoke, she slowly exhaled, then took in one final breath, and whispered into Takeo's ear, and I'm sorry. I spoke out of turn. With that, she slowly let the breath out. And didn't inhale again. Her hand slipped from the top of Takeo's head and fell limply to her side. Her body, as if it had suddenly lost something essential, became much lighter. And yet, at the same time, it also felt as though something had been added, something heavy, weighing it down. Iori said nothing more. No more words. No more sound. Huh? Takeo had never known the world could be this quiet. As if some sound he had always taken for granted, had vanished completely. Wading through the muddy, debris-filled water, Takeo felt his own body growing heavier. How strange he hadn't been injured, and yet it suddenly felt like every step was so hard to take. Probably just the water, he thought. It must be the water. Takeo's lips trembled slightly, then he forced a smile and spoke to Iori on his back. Asato-senpai should have already brought that injured team member to the surface. The Kakushi should be on their way by now to handle the situation. And if we're lucky, maybe even a Hashira will come to assist. You probably haven't met any of the Hashira yet, right? I've only met Rengoku Kyojuro and Kenroji Mitsurai. They're both really kind people. I'm sure the Hashira coming this time will be the same. Oh, right, you don't know who Mitsurai is. Mitsurai-san, she's the love Hashira. She used to be a disciple of Kyojuro-san too, so technically, we're fellow disciples. When there's time, I'll introduce you. You said you wanted to become Kyojuro-san's successor, right? I'll tell him for you. I'll tell him. But Takeo couldn't speak any further. Something clogged his nose. He couldn't say another word. So he simply shut his mouth and focused on carrying Iori up toward the surface. But after only a short distance, he heard a rumbling, accompanied by tremors through the ground. He saw the walls collapsing, chunks of the ceiling falling. From within the crumbling rock walls, massive clouds of dust came pouring down, hitting the ground in waves. This cave, much of its structure had been filled with the dust demon's dust. So now, with the demon dead and his blood demon art no longer sustaining it, everything began to collapse, dust breaking down, the entire cave gradually falling apart. The cave is collapsing. Realizing this, Takeo quickened his pace. He ran through the flooded, muddy cave, heading back the way they had come. It looked like something straight out of a movie, rocks crashing down behind him, chunks of the cave wall collapsing just inches from his heels, always one step too slow to catch him. But unlike those miraculous escapes in films, this time, there was no miracle. Just as he neared the mouth of the tunnel, the falling wall of rock finally caught up to the fleeing Takeo. The stone came crashing down, not toward him, but toward the person on his back, Iori. He didn't even think. He didn't move his head, didn't calculate, didn't hesitate. Takeo immediately twisted his body, shielding Iori in his arms. Though his body was a bit smaller than hers, it wrapped tightly around her, firmly protecting her from all the collapsing stone and falling debris. Ugh! Rocks and dust buried his body, bit by bit. And then, along with Iori, he was buried here. We found them. Over here. Hurry, dig them out. Got it? He's out. When Takeo regained consciousness, the first thing he heard was a flurry of chaotic voices. He felt his body being pulled out by someone. Then laid down on the ground. He vaguely sensed someone performing chest compressions, followed by something being poured into his mouth. Then he started coughing violently, cough cough. Bleg. Water, mud, and bits of ruptured internal tissue spewed from his mouth with that single heave. With so much of the debris cleared from inside him, Takeo began to feel a little better. He slowly lifted his head, gazing up at the sky, where the first light of dawn was beginning to break. Warmth fell gently on his body, and for the first time in a while, he felt a sense of peace. The sun had risen. At the very least they were safe now. Takeo. Takeo, are you okay? Yoshizuru Asato's figure quickly appeared before Takeo. He rushed to the boy's side, calling his name anxiously. Takeo shook his head and managed a weak smile. Iori and I, we killed the demon. Iori, nay. Asato froze, staring blankly at Takeo. But Takeo didn't seem to notice. He went on, yeah, it was Iori who broke open the wall to the underground river. That's how we stopped the demon from escaping. Aha. Haha. She's the real hero of this mission. Oh, right, where's Iori? Takeo. Sakuma is dead, Asato said heavily. Takeo seemed not to hear him. Iori said she was going to make rice crackers for me. The last batch got all soggy. She said she'd make new ones, and then she... Takeo. Asato suddenly grabbed his shoulders, staring him directly in the eyes. He spoke clearly, one word at a time, Sakuma Iori, is dead. Staring into Asato's eyes, Takeo finally understood. He echoed the words back almost as if asking a question, dead. She's dead, Asato confirmed. Oh. She's dead. Takeo sat there in a daze, lost in thought. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply sat there quietly, gazing at the world around him. Eventually, his eyes fell on the bodies. The ones that had been dug out, fallen Demon Slayer Corps members, and others. Sakuma Iori was lying among them, no different from the rest. Except that her body was more intact, she didn't stand out at all. Why is she lying there? Ah. Asato told me that she's fine. Just dead. Oh. Takeo understood the reality now. Sakuma Iori was dead. He thought to himself she had died quietly. Ordinarily. Unremarkably, read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBI Chapter 63, The Taste of Loss. Clack pack clack. In the courtyard, the Shishiodashi gave a crisp, hollow knock. Takeo sat on the veranda beside the courtyard, holding a cup of tea that Senjuro had brewed for him. He lifted his head and stared blankly at the clear, cloudless sky. 2 days had passed since the incident with the dust demon. Sakuma Iori's funeral had already been held alongside the other fallen members of the Demon Slayer Corps. There was no grand ceremony, no feast, just a simple burial, in the place where all demon slayers were laid to rest after death. That day, Takeo had met the master of the Demon Slayer Corps. Supported by his wife, the master had personally attended the funeral. He seemed to have spoken to Takeo. But Takeo hadn't absorbed a single word. All he had done was stare at Sakuma Iori's gravestone calmly, as though looking at the grave of a stranger. He hadn't reacted at all. He'd even bid farewell to Yoshizuru Asato, who was heading out for the next mission. But he hadn't gone with him. Instead, Takeo returned to the Rengoku estate to do what a successor was supposed to do. Training. That was all. 2 days had passed, and even now, Takeo still felt no real sense of Sakuma Iori's death. It felt like a dream. Just a moment ago, she had been smiling, laughing, talking with him, and the next, she was lying there, still and lifeless. Takeo had never experienced something like this before. Not in his past life. Not in this one either, not since losing the memories of who he used to be. But now, it seemed, he had. Does it hurt? A bold, booming voice rang out beside him. Takeo didn't even need to look to know who it was. Kyojuro-san, he said softly. Rengoku Kyojuro stood next to him. Like Takeo, he was staring at the Shishiodashi in the courtyard. Then, repeating his question, he asked once more, does it hurt? The death of a comrade. Kyojuro-san, have you experienced something like this before? Takeo didn't answer the question. He simply asked in a calm voice. Kyojuro responded seriously, of course. A comrade you were just laughing with moments ago suddenly killed by a demon. That kind of thing is common in the Demon Slayer Corps. Then what did you do, Kyojuro-san? Kill demons. Kyojuro answered without hesitation. What we can do is kill demons to avenge our fallen comrades. What we must do is become stronger, strong enough that we'll never let another comrade die before our eyes again. The death of a comrade was always a sorrowful thing, but those who had died could not return. What the living could do, was carry the will of the dead and keep moving forward. To slay demons, to eliminate them, to find the source of it all, and cut it down completely. That was the only way to end this chain of tragedy. Kyojuro too had felt grief, had felt anger when comrades died. But long ago, he had already turned those emotions into fuel for fighting demons. To grow stronger. To become even stronger. To become stronger than anyone else. Only then could you save more people. Only then could you stop more people from dying. That was the message Kyojuro wanted to pass on to Takeo. Takeo remained silent, offering no reply. At some point, Kyojuro had already left. But before he did, he left a small bundle beside Takeo. Takeo glanced at the bundle lying next to him, reached out, and opened it. Inside wasn't a sword manual or anything like that. There was only one thing inside. Food, a rice cracker. It looked like it had been left out for some time. The surface was slightly damp, and had dried again afterward. It looked like something that probably shouldn't be eaten anymore. But staring at the rice cracker, Takeo smiled. Because it was like he could still hear Sakuma Iora's slightly annoying, slightly bossy voice. Only now, that voice would never be heard again. Loss, huh? Takeo suddenly remembered a question Yoshizuru Asato had asked him before they set out to defeat the dust demon. You've never lost someone important before, have you? At the time, Takeo hadn't known how to answer. Even now, he wasn't sure if he could. Was Sakuma Iori someone important to him? The honest answer was no. To Takeo, Iori was just a friend. Someone he'd met along the way, someone who had been a little annoying at first, but eventually became tolerable, even easy to talk to. Someone he could have honest conversations with. But nothing more. Nothing deeper. He didn't love her, and he didn't believe she loved him. They couldn't even be called close friends, not really. Their bond hadn't grown to that point. And yet, despite that, Takeo had already gotten used to her being there. And that was the key to understanding what it meant to lose someone. Because when you get used to a person, or a thing, being part of your life, when that presence suddenly disappears, you feel the absence. You feel the imbalance. That discomfort might fade with time. Or it might leave a mark that stays with you forever. Takeo had originally thought Iori would be the former type, the kind of person that, even if they drifted apart, even if they never saw each other again, he would eventually forget. But now, he realized Iori was the latter. She had, without question, left behind an indelible mark in his heart. Because this was Takeo's first true loss. Across both his past life and this one, in two entirely different worlds and all kinds of relationships, she was the first friend whose death he had witnessed with his own eyes. Until now, Takeo had always thought that death was something distant, something that wouldn't happen to him or those around him. He had never seen it, and so, naturally, he had never truly felt it. But now, he understood. Now he understood what death meant. What loss meant. And, what anger meant. A soul from a peaceful era had finally come to feel the cruelty of this world. He finally understood this wasn't an anime world. This wasn't some fantasy setting. This was a real world, undeniably real and inescapably harsh. Everyone in it was a living, breathing person. They had flesh and blood. They could speak, laugh, cry. They had personalities, some irritating, some endearing, but they were real. They existed in this world. And anyone who dared to take those lives away, especially demons, especially the Demon King, Muzan, was utterly unforgivable. Kibutsuji. Muzan. Takeo spoke the Demon King's name aloud, his crimson eyes burning like flames. He didn't know where Kibutsuji Muzan was. But he believed without a doubt that one day, he would find him. And when that day came, he would cut him down. So that people like Miss Hanako, like Iorine, and even Takeo himself, would never have to experience such tragedies again. So that no one would ever have to fear the night. That day might not be so far off. Takeo thought of this as he picked up the rice cracker beside him and took a bite. But the moment he bit into it, he laughed. Iorine, your cooking's gotten worse. It tasted awful. Naturally. It was a rice cracker that had been left out for several days, rained on more than once, then dried again before finally being wrapped and brought here. The salty fragrance that rice crackers were supposed to have was completely gone. All that remained was an indescribable bitterness. It really didn't taste good. Good thing I like eating it. Takeo murmured with a smile, then, one piece after another, he placed the rice crackers into his mouth. Crunch. Crunch. The sound of chewing echoed quietly. An unknown, clear liquid fell from above, striking the ground and scattering into droplets. A moment later, the startled deer sounded again. Pack ___________________ read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBI Chapter 64, 64, Summary and Q&A. In short, that wraps up the plot of Volume 1. Crossed fingers, partying face. Sakuma Iora's death had been planned from the start. It wasn't because she was disliked or anything like that. It was only through her death that Takeo, a person from a modern, peaceful world who had never experienced true death, loss, and cruelty, could begin to understand how harsh this world truly is. This entire first volume has essentially been about Takeo's transmigration and integration into this world. Otherwise, he would, like the MCS of generic DS fanfics, have looked completely out of place. Now that that's done, here's a Q&A to clarify a few things. Q1, did Takeo transmigrate, or was he reincarnated? A1, although he thinks he's a transmigrator. The answer is that he reincarnated. He regained memories from his past life only after dying. Because he had been dead for a while, his brain had some memory fragmentation, which is why he couldn't remember things at first. Q2, why are Old Man Logan's powers so weak? A2, this version of Old Man Logan is the one who died and was buried, as seen at the end of his movie. Those familiar will know how weakened he had become. Since Takeo received this legacy right after, the power was also further diminished. The short ANS for the plot. However, it will gradually recover as Takeo grows stronger. Q3, why did 2B attack Takeo right away? A3, because the first time Takeo inherited a power, he took a shortcut. 2B was carrying out the trial meant for Old Man Logan. If not for that, 2B's trial would have been different. Q4, who dug Takeo and the others out after the battle with the Dust Demon? A4, the Kakushi Squad, the Demon Slayer Corps support and logistics unit. They appear in the original story too, and their role will be explained more later. Q5, if Takeo hadn't been there, who would have defeated the Dust Demon? A5, the Serpent Hashira, Iguro Obanai. His bandaged mouth prevents him from inhaling dust, and his snake Automata can detect heat signatures. He could have ended the fight instantly. Q6, so did the Serpent Hashira show up? A6, yes, but when he saw that the demon had already been dealt with, he left. That's why Takeo didn't see him. Q7, are Ioru and Asato original characters? A7, yes. In my setup, without Takeo, one would have died to a water demon, and the other in the arms of the cloth demon. So technically, Ioru did live a bit longer, yeah. Q8, how many Hashira are there right now? A8, as of the end of Volume 1, there are 8 Hashira. Only the Mist Hashira hasn't appeared yet since Muichiro Tokaido hasn't become a Hashira RN, the others are all in place. While the original story said that 6 months without a personnel change was considered excellent, if you look at the side stories, Jiyu, Shinobu, Chilmei, Tenjin, and Sanamai all became Hashira before Kyojuro. Shortly after Kyojuro's promotion, Mitsurai also became a Hashira. That's 7. Obanai, who was saved by Shinjuro Rengoku, soon became a Hashira too. So logically, he should have already been one before Kyojuro, even if the side story doesn't mention it. So yes, there are 8. Q9, what's my favorite Demon Slayer fanfic? A9, my favorite Demon Slayer fanfic is A Silent Journey by Emmanuel_Capricorn. That's all for Volume 1. Enough rambling, please look forward to Volume 2. See you in Volume 2. Fire Volume 2 starts tomorrow, Fire Chapter 65, 65, it's time to head out. Clack. Slash. Ting. Clashing metal echoed through the pitch-black mental space. A silver-white blade clashed again and again with a Nichiren sword. Takeo and 2B's silhouettes crossed paths as they dueled. Black and white streaks collided again and again in the space of consciousness, until on the final clash they separated. Huff, huff. Dressed in a white haori, Takeo gripped two Nichiren swords in his hands, arms trembling slightly. 2B's power was overwhelming. As an android, her strength and speed far exceeded any ordinary human. Even more frustrating was that her recovery rate, boosted by her internal chips, seemed faster than Takeo's. This is a character from one of my old games. I used. Throughout this intense duel, Takeo came to a realization: the 2B before him was equipped with the exact chip configuration he had once set for her in-game. The problem was it had been far too long. Takeo couldn't clearly remember which specific chip builds he had used. He vaguely remembered some of the chip setups, only a few, but he was sure about them. There was overclock, which allowed time to seemingly slow down. Then auto heal, no damage, which rapidly restored health after a period without taking hits. Also, shockwave, which enabled blade attacks to emit energy blasts. And finally Takeo was still trying to recall when 2B suddenly lunged at him again. After this prolonged clash with 2B, Takeo had come to understand that her current actions were likely a kind of test. Only by defeating her with his own strength could he inherit the full extent of her abilities. But defeat didn't necessarily mean overpowering her through brute strength. Maybe, just maybe, some form of clever trickery could count as well. With that thought flashing through his mind, Takeo stared at the blade coming at him, then gritted his teeth and braced for impact head-on. Squish. The short katana virtuous contract pierced straight through Takeo's body, running through him front to back. But he didn't utter a single sound. Instead, he activated his full-body breathing technique, forcibly clamping the blade within his muscle fibers. Fifth form. His twin Nichiren swords slashed out. In just an instant, 8 fierce strikes, 4 from each side, lashed out toward 2B's neck. 8-fold fangs. The fifth form of his wolf-breathing style was a concentrated technique that delivered at least 8 strikes to the same spot using dual blades in the blink of an eye. With a technique like this, Takeo had confidence he could sever even the hardened neck of a demon from the 12 Kizuki. Let alone 2B. Sparks flew from 2B's mechanical neck, and in the blink of an eye, her head flew through the air. A surge of joy rose in Takeo's heart. I did it. He had decapitated 2B by all accounts. That should qualify as defeating her. That meant, he could now inherit her full abilities. Takeo had just felt a surge of triumph, only to watch, right in front of him, as 2B's body began to move again. The exposed wires and metal of her severed neck started fusing, reforming, reshaping into a brand new head in a completely unnatural, impossible way. Before Takeo could even yell, "That's not scientifically possible," the newly regenerated 2B drew her virtuous treaty greatsword and in one swift motion, sliced his head clean off. Talk about karmic retribution. Shit. I remember now. His consciousness was forcibly ejected from the inner mental world. Takeo opened his eyes back in the courtyard and cursed under his breath. He had just remembered the most critical chip he'd ever equipped on 2B. Restart, damn it, she can reboot even after being decapitated. Takeo grumbled to himself furiously. The chip restart, as the name suggests, allowed the user to automatically reboot after their health hit 0. In the game, this meant a chance at resurrection. In simpler terms, it's a revive function. While playing the game, Takeo had been terrified of dying so naturally, he'd upgraded that chip to the maximum level. At full level, restart had a 50% chance to revive the user upon death, restoring 80% of their HP. And clearly, the 2B in his mental space had hit that 50% revival rate. Well, great, Takeo muttered, scratching at his now slightly longer hair. Looks like next time, I'll need a way to take out her second life too. Killing 2B once was a coin flip. Sure, she might die, but she also had just as good a chance of popping right back up. Takeo had no intention of gambling on a 50-50ths. For now, he decided to treat 2B as a boss with a second phase, someone who needed to be defeated twice to truly go down. Still, it wasn't all that hopeless. After over half a month of rest and intense training, Takeo had finally grasped the deeper secret of the breathing technique's total concentration, constant. A state where one maintained the flow of their breathing technique not just in combat, but while eating, walking, even sleeping, making it a seamless part of their being. According to Kyojuro Rengoku, mastering this was one of the key requirements for becoming a Hashira. All the Hashira were capable of using total concentration, constant. That might sound a bit abstract to some people, so to put it simply, total concentration was what most demon slayers used in key moments, essentially like unleashing a special move, concentrating all their strength into a powerful technique. But total concentration, constant, was like turning that special move into a basic attack. And now, Takeo had reached the point where he could treat his special move like a regular strike. If he were to face the dust demon again, he probably wouldn't even need any thinking. One strike might be enough to take its head. Take its head. Takeo repeated the phrase in his mind, then let out a long breath and patted his cheeks, forcing himself not to dwell on the past. He was just about to get up and splash some water on his face, planning to return to his mental realm and spar with 2B again, when his Kazhigai crow, Kotaro, swooped in from the sky above. Got a mission? Takeo asked the descending crow. No. Kotaro shook his head, then loudly announced, notification. The Demon Slayer Corps has officially welcomed its 9th Hashira as of last night. The Mist Hashira Tokaido Muichiro. Notification complete. After delivering the report in his usual shrill tone, Kotaro immediately reverted to his timid demeanor, hiding nervously behind Takeo. Takeo absent-mindedly pulled out a few grains of rice from his pocket and tossed them to Kotaro, only then realizing what the crow had just reported. The Mist Hashira. Tokaido Muichiro. He muttered softly. That same kid he had once fought and narrowly defeated using sheer trickery and borrowed talent. That boy who was the same age as him, yet possessed real, terrifying natural ability. In just under 2 months since the final selection, he had already become a Hashira. Mist Hashira. 2 months. Iorine, that's what real talent looks like. Takeo laughed quietly, but his smile was tight and hollow. 2 months, maybe even less, since the final selection hadn't even been that long ago. And even if you counted that period too, it would barely be 2 months in total. No way he became a Hashira just by accumulating kills to meet the quota. There had to be something more. Muichiro must have slain one of the 12 Kazuki. Takeo, just fighting a prospective 12 Kazuki, had already lost a comrade. Yet some people could kill an actual 12 Kazuki and become a Hashira with ease. The gap between people, sometimes really was wider than the gap between man and beast. Phew, it's time to head out. He picked up his sword, then picked up another. Strapping both Nichiren swords to his sides, Takeo reached out to gently pat Kotaro on the head, then rose to his feet, ready to go. Technically, as the Flame Hashirist Tsugyuko, he had the privilege of not being deployed for missions. He only needed to assist when Kyojuro Rengoku was mobilized, and otherwise could focus entirely on training, preparing to eventually inherit the title of Hashira himself. That was why Takeo had stayed at the Rengoku estate for half a month, training constantly in total concentration, constant, and occasionally sparring with 2B in his inner world. He'd been waiting for intel on a 12 Kazuki. Once a lead surfaced, he'd planned to personally hunt one down and earn a direct promotion to Hashira. But now, the missed Hashira had already been established. The ninth Hashira had been born into the core. Takeo didn't want to keep waiting. He needed to go out and slay demons. If he stayed cooped up any longer, he'd start to rust. Red 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBI Chapter 66, A Demon Targeting Scholars. Takeo-san? Do you have a mission? Senjuro asked curiously as he stepped out with a tray of tea and sweets, seeing that Takeo had already put on his haori and picked up his pack, clearly ready to depart. Takeo nodded. I already sent my crow to request a mission for me. You're not continuing your training. I've already trained as much as I can here. Staying longer won't help me improve. Kyojuro had left 2 days ago to carry out a mission. Technically, he could have stayed behind a few more days to continue mentoring his Tsugyuko, but perhaps he trusted Takeo's current strength, or maybe the mission had been too urgent. Either way, he chose to go. Takeo staying behind at the Rengoku estate to continue training alone didn't seem productive anymore. More importantly, a certain drunkard hanging around the estate had been getting on his nerves lately, adding to his frustration. The birth of the new Mist Hashira had conveniently given Takeo a reason to leave. His peer, someone from his own generation, had already become a Hashira, while he remained stagnant. At most, his rank had jumped 2 levels, from Mizunoto to Kanu, thanks to his involvement in the last mission. But in the face of the 10 total ranks within the core, jumping 2 steps didn't feel like much of a difference. Well, except that the pay was slightly better. Takeo wanted to continue slaying demons, continue tracking down Kibutsuji Musen. At the same time, he was unwilling to fall behind. He wanted to become a Hashira as soon as possible. So, he couldn't afford to stay here any longer. Hearing this, Senjuro didn't say anything more. He personally walked Takeo to the gate and, just like he always did with his older brother, called out as Takeo left, "Take care out there." Yeah. Takeo didn't look back. He just waved behind him and disappeared around the corner. Before Takeo became a demon slayer, there were 8 active Hashira in the Demon Slayer Corps. It was said that, excluding the original generation that first created the breathing techniques, this was the strongest lineup in history. In earlier generations, it had been rare to have all 9 Hashira positions filled at once. Often, when someone was newly promoted, another would retire or worse, be killed by demons. When no skilled candidates were available among the key no-rank swordsmen to take their place, vacancies remained. At the worst point, there had been as few as 3 or 5 Hashira in a single generation. Only in this generation had there been a full 8 active Hashira who had all held their positions for a considerable time, none retiring, and none dying in battle. Now that the 9th Hashira had emerged, the Demon Slayer Corps had reached its strongest peak since the generation that first created the breathing techniques. Takeo felt this marked a turning point. The Corps now had the strength to truly challenge Kibutsuji Musen. Once the main character arrived, the final countdown for demons and the fate of the Demon Slayer Corps would begin. But now that all the Hashira are in place, even if I manage to slay a member of the 12 Kazuki, can I still become a Hashira? As he walked, Takeo pondered this question. The number of Hashira had always been set at 9. According to tradition, this was because the kanji for Hashira has 9 strokes. Under normal circumstances, 9 was the maximum. Rarely could the Corps find enough swordsmen capable of reaching the level of Hashira. Takeo had once looked through the Rengoku family's scrolls and records, but found no precedent or guidance for what to do if someone with Hashira-level strength emerged beyond the existing 9. After all, even gathering 9 of them had always been an incredible feat. Expecting more than that was practically impossible. So naturally, the Rengoku records had nothing to say about such a scenario. Whatever. I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Let's focus on the mission first. Takeo looked up at the sky. His Kajigai crow, Kotaro, had already returned from its flight with a new assignment. Takeo caught him gently in his hand and quickly learned the details of his next destination, Mito. Mito, during this era of Japan, was still considered one of the relatively large cities. While not among the major urban centers, it was still quite prosperous, at least enough to show signs of early modernization. You might wonder why Takeo thought so. It was because he had arrived here via the Mito line, the railway that connected Mito to Tokyo, completing the journey in less than a day. Railway development often brings prosperity to cities, and Mito was no exception. All around him were people dressed in refined clothing, some even wearing formal Western-style suits, giving Takeo a strong sense of déjà vu. However, having already seen Tokyo in this era, the relatively less advanced Mito didn't leave much of an impression on him. After all, someone who had lived in modern society wasn't likely to be awestruck by scenes from the past. So, after taking a brief look around, Takeo quickly got his bearings and set off toward his destination. Takeo's destination this time was near Karakan in Mito. It was a well-known local attraction located on a hill. Once at the top, one could enjoy a wide view of the forests below and the distant Lake Senba. Because of its beautiful scenery, many scholars, poets, and well-to-do individuals often chose to visit during holidays to admire the blossoms, drink, or go picnicking. And spring right now was the peak season for such picnics. However, not long ago, someone had gone missing in the area. The first was an unpopular scholar, so his disappearance initially drew little attention. But soon after, another scholar vanished, and only then did the Demon Slayer Corps begin to take notice. It had been a month since the first incident. In that time, there had been a total of 4 disappearances. The local authorities had no leads and couldn't find any of the missing. The Demon Slayer Corps suspected that a demon was involved. Since Takeo was already in Tokyo and could reach Mito quickly by train, the mission had been assigned to him. All 4 missing individuals were scholars, it seems. Takeo pondered the details the Corps had provided. After asking around the area, he confirmed this to be true. All 4 victims were fairly young. The oldest was only 29, and the youngest had just turned 21. They shared no similarities in appearance, height, features, or age. The only thing they had in common was that they were all writers contributing to local newspapers or publishing houses. But even then, their work had nothing in common. One of them was more like a reporter, jotting down interesting things he saw and sending them to the newspaper. 2 were third-rate novelists who wrote cliché love stories full of romance and sentimentality. The last one specialized in horror, more specifically, niche tales resembling urban legends and local folklore. None of them were famous, and they visited Karakan at different times. However, they all went missing at night. Well, the place does get pretty lively in the evening. Takeo glanced at the street lamps as he pondered. The main roads in the city were lined with electric streetlights. Every household had access to electric lights, and even the upper floors of traditional-style buildings had bulbs hanging. At night, the city glowed almost as bright as daytime. In ancient times, it was rare for people to witness such sights, and Mito's development had only taken off in the last few years. That's why many scholars and writers would choose to go up the mountain at night to enjoy the view. Some would sketch what they saw, others would record it in writing, and perhaps it was exactly because of that habit that demons lurking in the shadows found their opportunity. But if it's specifically targeting writers? Takeo thought it over for a moment and then suddenly came up with an idea. However, before he could put it into action, he suddenly heard someone calling out to him, "Hey! Kamado NII." Turning toward the voice, Takeo spotted a small child bouncing through the crowd. Miura. Miura Ichiro? Takeo looked at the familiar figure in surprise and immediately remembered who he was. It was the child of that wealthy merchant family, the very household that had given him work back when he first crawled out of that grave. Miura Ichiro. Underscore 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 read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBI chapter 67, 67, sent beneath the powder in a tea room filled with the scent of lit incense. Takeo sat across from Miyuritaro, while a maid quietly stepped forward to pour tea for the two. Miyuritaro didn't look much different from before, still the plump and well-dressed image of a wealthy man. But at the sight of Takeo now, there was no smile on his face. From the looks of it, Mr. Kamado, you've become a demon slayer. You know about demon slayers, Mr. Miura, right? Takeo asked with curiosity. Miyuritaro replied, I've heard of them. I also had a conversation with that Mr. Yoshizuru who came by last time after all. I see. Takeo's face showed no expression at the mention of Yoshizuru Asato. But Miyuritaro noticed something nonetheless. He looked puzzled and asked, what's wrong? Didn't you become a demon slayer through Mr. Yoshizuru's recommendation? You don't seem particularly close. No, we're actually on very good terms. Takeo gave a slight smile. Yes, they were on good terms. He had even hoped to have Asato become a Tsugyuko under Kyojuro Rengoku, but Asato declined. Takeo didn't know where he'd gone since then. Putting Yoshizuru Asato out of his mind, Takeo exhaled and got straight to the point. Mr. Miura, I wanted to ask, do you know anything about the recent string of disappearances? Disappearances? Oh, you mean the case of those missing writers? Yes, I've heard about it. But since my business isn't based in this area, I haven't paid much attention. Is this a demon-related matter? Miyuritaro quickly picked up on the likely reason for Takeo's presence and frowned as he asked. Takeo nodded slightly. The investigation's still ongoing, nothing confirmed yet, but the likelihood is high. A demon again. Miyuritaro's frown deepened. It was obvious how much he despised their existence. And rightfully so. The last time a demon appeared, it had caused serious trouble for Miyuritaro. His goods failed to reach Mito on time, and he had to undergo inspection by the authorities. Worst of all, demons disintegrated into ash upon death, leaving no evidence behind. In the end, Miyuritaro could only swallow the bitter loss in silence. Because of this, he harbored no goodwill toward demons whatsoever, nor did he have much affection for demon slayers either. If Takeo hadn't saved his son last time, Miura wouldn't even be treating him this politely now. Still, he understood one thing clearly: when it came to dealing with demons, only demon slayers could do the job. So after letting out a sigh, Miyuritaro shared what he knew. I don't know much, but I heard that those people went to Karakin sometime after 6 in the evening. It's said that just before they disappeared, they were seen in the company of a certain geisha. Geisha? Yes. There are quite a few geisha along the red light district near Mito. Many travelers or local scholars sometimes go there looking for female companions to stroll around with or accompany them to Karakin. It's one of their little indulgences. Perhaps because Takeo was still young, Miura didn't go into detail about what exactly those men were doing up there. But the fact that they specifically went in the evening made it rather obvious. So that means, this time, the demon is disguised as a geisha? To think it could blend into crowds like that, this kind of demon won't be easy to deal with. Most demons usually chose to hide deep in the mountains or forests, since their appearance differed drastically from ordinary humans. If they lingered among crowds, they'd be recognized at a glance as something abnormal. And that would make them much easier for the Demon Slayer Corps to find. Demons that could blend into human society were either extremely intelligent or possessed powerful mimicry abilities that allowed them to disguise themselves flawlessly as humans. Some might even be members of the 12 Kizuki. The thought made the corners of Takeo's lips curl slightly upward. If it was one of the 12 Kizuki, then that would be perfect. Mr. Miura, there's something I'd like to ask your help with. As he considered his plan, Takeo thought of a way to lure the demon out. Miyuritaro paused mid-sip from his teacup and asked, "What is it?" "I need help acquiring the identity of a scholar. I'd like to visit that red light district myself." Takeo said this seriously. Ugh. Miura nearly choked on his tea. "You want to visit the area in the evening?" "Yes. Since the demon was targeting scholars, he might as well disguise himself as one." Thanks to the compulsory education system from his previous life, Takeo had no worries about exposing himself in an era with such a low literacy rate. The only possible issue was his age. It might raise some doubts or suspicion. But that wasn't a major problem. With a bit of makeup and height-boosting insoles in his shoes, Takeo could pass for an average adult male. At most, he just looked a little short. As for producing respectable writing samples, well, that was the easiest part. Plagiarizing from memory? Takeo could certainly handle that. Takeo had to admit he didn't particularly like the atmosphere of the red light district. First of all, most of the geisha here painted their faces ghostly white. That deathly pale look wasn't something he found remotely appealing. Second, the smell. The overwhelming mix of perfume, powder, and cosmetics created a dense haze of scent that completely masked any trace of a demon's presence. Perhaps that was exactly why the demon had chosen to hide here. Well, I've gotten in, my identity is set. So how exactly do I begin looking? Standing in the middle of the red light district, Takeo, dressed in a white green robe, wearing wooden clogs, and holding a folding fan like a proper scholar, watched the flow of people coming and going around him. Although witnesses said the missing men had all encountered a geisha before vanishing, geisha were the one thing this red light district had in abundance. None of those people had seen the geisha's face clearly. No one knew her appearance, height, or age. Trying to find her under such vague conditions was no different from searching for a needle in a haystack. Takeo's original plan had been to disguise himself as the kind of target that geisha might be drawn to, lie in wait, and let the demon come to him. But now that he thought about it more carefully, he realized he didn't actually know why the demon was targeting these scholars in the first place. If it was about talent, none of them had produced anything noteworthy. If it was about looks, the oldest among them had a pockmarked face, far from anything you'd call handsome. And if it was some kind of revenge, that made even less sense. The four missing individuals all worked at different places. A completely indiscriminate pattern of attacks that was the most frustrating thing to deal with. Because it left Takeo with no clues at all. And that made sense. If there had been a clue, the local authorities probably would have figured it out by now. The Demon Slayer Corps wouldn't have needed to step in. So now, Takeo was just about to choose a tea house to step into and take a look around. Suddenly, a scent drifting from someone passing by caught his attention. He turned his head and saw a young girl dressed in the attire of a geisha. She wore a brightly colored kimono, her hair styled in a fan-like shape atop her head. She was clinging to a man dressed like a scholar, chatting and laughing cheerfully. Takeo's gaze paused on the girl, his eyes narrowing slightly. The scent of cosmetics on her was strong, but beneath that thick layer of perfume, there was a faint, almost imperceptible undertone, something distinct. A peculiar scent, vaguely resembling the stench of a demon but extremely faint. If she hadn't passed right next to him, Takeo would never have caught it. Damn. Did I stumble onto a lead this quickly? Eyes fixed on the backs of the geisha and the scholar, Takeo didn't hesitate. He subtly checked the positions of his dual Nichiren swords concealed beneath his wide kimono sleeves and began trailing the girl without delay. _______________________ read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBI Chapter 68, 812 Kazuki. Lord Kazuki, you're drunk. No. I'm not drunk. I can still drink. Why? Ayako, do you think I can't drink? Inside a room somewhere in the brothel, a girl named Ayako was serving a man with a shaved head Kazuji. He clutched a wine jug in his hand, his face flushed red, reeking of alcohol, and shouting incoherently in a drunken stupor. Ayako had no choice but to pour him another drink. Then she said gently, "Then Mr. Kazuji, please drink a little less. You still have work tomorrow." Newspaper, that damn newspaper. They didn't bring in the good things from abroad, no, they brought in that way of treating people like livestock. No. I'm not going tomorrow. I'll just drink here. Come on, Ayako, drink with me, drink. Kazuji rambled on drunkenly, but in the end, he couldn't withstand the alcohol's effects. With a heavy thud, he collapsed face first onto the table. Ayako quickly reached out to gather the plates and side dishes before he fell, preventing them from crashing to the floor. Looking at Kazuji, now completely passed out, Ayako couldn't help but let out a sigh. No, more accurately, it was a breath of relief. You're really lucky, Lord Kazuji. If you were any more sober, I'm afraid I wouldn't have a choice but to take you away. She whispered to the unconscious man. Ayako was talking to herself. It was a habit of hers. She always did this when she was about to do something she didn't want to, or when she was nervous. To calm her nerves. Usually, no one ever heard her muttering, much less responded. However, what frightened Ayako today was that a stranger's voice suddenly sounded behind her. Really? And where were you planning to take him? The voice belonged to a young man, sounding like a teenager. Ayako turned her head sharply and saw a boy standing behind her in wooden clogs, dressed in a dark green kimono, with the refined appearance of a scholar. She had no idea how long he had been standing there. His red pupils gleamed brightly under the room's light. What stood out most was the teardrop-shaped mole beneath his right eye, which gave him a distinct and striking charm. Ayako was momentarily stunned by his sudden appearance, but then something clicked in her mind. She quickly snatched up a pair of scissors and pointed them at the boy in front of her. You, who are you? How did you get in? The boy ignored the scissors and slowly stepped forward, his eyes locked onto hers. The pressure radiating from him pinned Ayako in place. She couldn't even move. You haven't answered me yet. Where are you taking him? The boy placed his hands on his hips. Ayako followed his movement and noticed the hilt of a sword partially hidden beneath his kimono. A sword? He's carrying a sword? Is it real? Ayako wasn't sure whether the weapon was real or not. After all, with the sword ban order still in effect, no one dared to carry a blade openly in public. And even if they did, most were bamboo practice swords or wooden replicas. However, under the oppressive pressure radiating from the boy, Ayako began to believe that the sword he carried might actually be real. I. Her voice trembled. Just thinking about it made her too scared to speak. Then, in the blink of an eye, a flash of cold light streaked through the air. Ayako hadn't even seen him move. One moment, everything was still. The next, his blade was out, pressed against her throat. I'll give you one last chance, the boy said coldly. Where were you planning to take him? And, why are you helping demons? Answer me, and I might spare your life. His voice was calm, unnervingly calm. So calm that it sent chills down Ayako's spine. Wait, demons. Did he just say demons? You're a demon slayer. At that moment, Ayako suddenly understood who he was. The boy's red eyes flashed. His gaze locked onto hers, and his voice grew lower, more threatening. You know about demon slayers? Of course, Ayako knew about them. The one she worked for, that demon, had killed several demon slayers already. At first, they thought that encountering a demon slayer might mean a chance to escape from the demon's control, but... Quick, you have to go. Ayako suddenly urged the boy, her voice sharp with panic. Hurry. Leave before he notices anything. Go, Now, perhaps moved by Ayako's desperate warning, the young man gave her a long, thoughtful look before slowly retracting his blade, tucking the hilt back beneath the hem of his loose kimono. Then he asked, "Were you coerced?" I can't say anything. It left something inside my body. I'm not allowed to talk about it? Ayako trembled violently. She was terrified, afraid that whatever the demon had planted inside her would detonate, turning her into a pile of bloody pulp like those who had defied it before. Seeing how frightened she was, the boy's voice softened noticeably. The icy tone from earlier disappeared, and he spoke with gentle reassurance. "You probably don't know this, but there's a massive gap in strength among demon slayers. For someone like me, ordinary demons are no threat at all." It sounded like he was trying to comfort her while casually stating his own strength. Ayako only shook her head. Seeing this, the boy added, "Demons vary in power. Only the ones with numbers in their eyes make me even slightly wary. The demon controlling you, it doesn't have numbers in its eyes, does it?" Numbers? After hearing that, Ayako began recalling carefully, and the fear on her face deepened. Yes, it does, the number, it's there." The boy's smile vanished instantly. A sharp light flickered in his eyes, one Ayako couldn't understand. He stepped forward and grabbed her shoulders firmly, asking in a grave tone, "I know you can't tell me its information directly," the boy said calmly. "So I'll ask the questions. Just answer yes or no." He looked her in the eyes. "There are characters engraved in its eyes, right?" Ayako nodded. "Among those characters, is there the phrase upper rank?" She shook her head. "Lower rank?" She nodded. The boy let out a slow breath, then began asking steadily, his voice low and serious. "Then the number in the other eye, is it 1? 2? 3? The moment he said 3, Ayako's entire body stiffened. That reaction confirmed everything. One of the 12 Kizuki, lower rank 3. He had just mentioned wanting to take down a member of the 12 Kizuki, and now, he'd stumbled across one. Takeo wasn't sure if he was incredibly lucky, or if the 12 Kizuki were just extremely unfortunate. In truth, given Takeo's current core rank, the proper procedure upon discovering the presence of a 12 Kizuki was not to engage immediately. He should have notified his Kajigai Crow to summon the nearest Hashira. First, to avoid dying needlessly. Second, to prevent alerting the demon and giving it time to escape once it realized the core was deploying a Hashira. But that was what ordinary Demon Slayer Corps members were expected to do. Based on his current strength, Takeo should be capable of killing a standard lower rank demon, something that Kyojuro had already confirmed. Therefore, if Takeo wanted to become a Hashira as soon as possible, he had to personally slay the 12 Kizuki member hiding here. However, even with that determination, Takeo still contacted Kotaro midway and asked him to notify the nearest Hashira. Just in case. What if this lower rank demon turned out to be stronger than expected and Takeo couldn't defeat it on his own? In that case, a Hashira would need to finish the job to prevent the demon from escaping. Compared to becoming a Hashira himself, ensuring the elimination of a 12 Kizuki member was the highest priority. Underscore 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 O, Red 12 Advanced Chaps P. Atrian, Horny FBI Chapter 69, 69, Getting Abducted. Takeo was also surprised that Mito was actually hiding one of the 12 Kizuki. However, he suspected that this particular 12 Kizuki member had only arrived recently, no more than a month or two ago. More boldly, it was likely that this lower moon demon had been recently promoted. After all, the Mist Hashira, Muichiro Tokaido, had just killed one of the 12 Kizuki. If that were the case, then this lower rank 3's position was quite precarious. Putting aside the reason for the lower rank 3's appearance in Mito for now, Takeo turned his attention back to Ayako and began asking about her connection to the missing scholars. You brought those scholars to be food for the demon. Takeo's gaze darkened. This behavior reminded him of the late Hanako. Ayako shook her head repeatedly. No, no, it has a habit of having people write biographies about it. Biographies. Yes. It wants them to write it into stories, and then, it acts out whatever it wants within the story. Ayako explained nervously. Her words made Takeo understand why the demon had been targeting those scholars. So, that was it. This was a demon obsessed with personalized storytelling. It kidnapped people just to make them write custom narratives for it. This concept was oddly ahead of its time. But then again, this was an opportunity. Looking at Ayako in front of him, Takeo reached down, pulled her up from the ground, and said, "Take me to it." Later. Ayako stared at him in shock. You already know about the characters in its eyes." "Yes, I know," Takeo said softly. "But I came here specifically for him. Don't worry about me, just take me there. What happens after that has nothing to do with you." No, 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 no. Ayako clutched her head, crying out in despair. "If I bring you there, and you attack it, then I'll definitely be eaten. I can't." Shhhk. This time, Takeo didn't bother with gentle words or further persuasion. He unsheathed one of his Nichiren swords and pointed it directly at her. "Then let's be direct. If you take me there now, you might live a little longer. If you don't, you'll die right here. So what's your choice?" Takeo's gaze locked on Ayako, expression unreadable and deadly serious. He wasn't bluffing. And he believed Ayako would make the smart decision. In the end, it was actually a simple choice. Painfully simple. The demon that had been threatening Ayako was hiding somewhere near Karakin. Every time Ayako brought a scholar there, the lower rank 3 would take the person away using a method she couldn't comprehend and vanish into its hidden lair. Ayako could have led Takeo straight to that location, but if she did, it would be undeniable proof of her betrayal. And lower rank 3 would kill her brutally, and without hesitation, just like the last person who brought a demon slayer. So instead, she chose to lead Takeo partway up the mountain. That way, she could pretend to be nothing more than a clueless girl who didn't realize he was a demon slayer. If she played the fool, maybe she wouldn't be killed. Maybe. Ayako was tense as she walked slowly up the mountain path with Takeo. The moon had risen high in the sky. As Ayako's steps grew slower and more hesitant, Takeo gave her a silent push on the back. Then he began his performance. "Ms. Ayako? What's the matter? We're not even at the top yet." I know." Pressed to continue, Ayako had no choice but to keep moving forward. Takeo held Ayako's hand, wearing a slightly dazed, almost lecherous expression like a lustful fool. In reality, he was fully alert, his senses sharpened and focused on his surroundings. He was simply waiting for the demon to appear so he could draw his sword and strike the moment it showed itself. But the expected scenario, lower rank 3 suddenly appearing and abducting him, never happened. Instead, the air became thick with a distinctive scent, the same demonic scent Takeo had detected on Ayako before. The scent of lower rank 3. Where? The moment the smell reached him, Takeo's eyes scanned the surroundings. His nose twitched subtly as he sniffed the air, looking quickly to both sides, but he couldn't see any trace of the demon. Still, the scent was getting stronger, closer, and closer. Until under his feet. "Under my feet." Takeo immediately looked down, but he didn't draw his sword. In that split second, he had already assessed that whatever was beneath him wasn't the demon itself. It was a shadow so dark, so thick, that it couldn't be natural. A shadow? His body began to sink, and in the blink of an eye, Takeo was pulled beneath the surface, engulfed by the darkness as the shadow dragged him swiftly away. The movement was fast. The shadow coiled tightly around Takeo, carrying him underground at incredible speed. After several seconds, the pitch-black surroundings began to fade. The darkness gave way to dim candlelight, flickering gently ahead of him. Only then did Takeo realize he was being pulled into a large room. It was an ordinary Japanese-style space, with brown-green tatami mats covering the floor. An antique floor lamp stood in the corner, casting a dim, flickering light. But Takeo wasn't alone. On either side of him knelt two scholars, heads bowed low to the ground. Each held a brush in their right hand and a long, blank scroll in their left, scribbling furiously across the paper. Their bodies trembled with exertion, and sweat streamed down their faces. Yet they quickly wiped it away with their sleeves, trying desperately not to let a single drop fall onto the scrolls. These two, they were the missing literati from earlier. Only two? Then the other two. Takeo's heart sank slightly as he continued scanning the room. But when his gaze shifted to the center, his breath caught in his throat. There, reclining in the main seat at the center of the room, was none other than lower rank 3. That much was expected and certainly not the reason Takeo's breath had stopped. What truly shocked him were the figures standing beside the demon. They wore Demon Slayer Corps uniforms, and they each held Nichiren swords in hand. But instead of attacking the demon, they stood beside him like loyal guards. Takeo could tell immediately, this wasn't their will. Their faces were twisted with pain, resentment, and humiliation. It was clear they wanted to resist, but couldn't. They seemed to be under the demon's control, much like Ayako had been, though the degree of manipulation appeared even more severe. And behind all of them, there was another demon slayer, someone who looked barely alive. His arms were bound to a long wooden board, his body suspended like a crucifixion. His head hung low, and his entire frame was covered in wounds. Only the occasional groan of pain proved he was still clinging to life. When Takeo's gaze landed on that figure, his hands began to tremble. His breathing grew rapid, and his eyes locked on the person suffering the most. Yoshizuru. Asato. Takeo spoke the name slowly, his voice shaking. Perhaps hearing his voice, the man raised his head with difficulty. Their eyes met. At first, Yoshizuru's expression was one of shock, then confusion. But almost immediately, that expression shifted to urgency. Run. His eyes said it clearly. He was begging Takeo to escape. To get out of there before it was too late. Underscore 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 O, Red 12 Advanced Chaps P. Atrian, Horny FBI Chapter 70, Fighting one of the 12 Kazuki. You're new here. Do you know any demon slayers? The one-eyed demon seated at the head of the room, lower rank 3, let out a displeased grunt. His kimono hung loosely, exposing his torso and collarbone. If he had been human, this posture might have appeared suave or elegant. But with his grotesque appearance, the effect was completely ruined. There was no charm, only revulsion. The single eye of lower rank 3 was fixed on Takeo, who stood between the two scholars. He extended a long, snake-like tongue to lick the corner of his mouth. His gaze flicked between Takeo and Asato, and then, as if something had clicked in his mind, he said, "Oh, so you're friends." Wolf breathing, fifth form, twin silver streaks burst through the flickering candlelight. Before the lower rank 3 could even finish his sentence, Takeo was already upon him. His dual Nichiren swords crossed in a flash, unleashing several overlapping strikes aimed precisely at the same spot. Eightfold Fang. This technique could decapitate any typical lower rank demon. If it connected, the demon's head would be cleanly severed without fail. However, Takeo's attack sliced through empty air. At some point, a shadow had replaced the demon's original position. The real lower rank 3 now stood at another location altogether. The blade sliced through the shadow, but instead of dissipating, the shadow solidified and coiled tightly around Takeo's arms, grappling with his movements and locking down his hands. Then, the lower-ranked demon spoke from across the room. "Terrifying, truly terrifying, little brat. If you had been just a bit faster, just a little bit, I fear you really might have taken my head off. Tell me, little devil, are you a Hashira?" The question hung in the air, coming from the now-relocated lower-ranked demon. Takeo didn't answer. Speaking to demons was pointless, it would only waste time. He had no interest in entertaining its provocations. Instead, he focused, tightening every muscle in his body, channeling his full strength into his arms. In an instant, he tore through the demon's shadowy restraint. So this shadow, though dangerous, could be broken, even severed. Realizing this, Takeo immediately shifted his stance and turned his blade once more, lunging forward to strike the demon again. But before he could land the blow, two figures stumbled between him and his target like human shields. They were the two Demon Slayer Corps members who had been stationed nearby to guard the lower-ranked demon, one male, one female. Both appeared young, and in this moment, their faces were contorted with terror. Tears streamed from their wide eyes, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. "No, don't. I don't want to die, please. I don't want to die yet." Driven by sheer survival instinct, the two reached out to Takeo not as comrades, but as desperate humans, pleading for their lives. Their bodies were frozen with fear, obstructing his path not by loyalty to the mission, but because they were too afraid to stand aside. Not all members of the Demon Slayer Corps possess the resolve to fight demons to the death. After all, most of them are only 15 or 16 years old. Even NieR was just 15. They shouldn't be fighting demons in places like this. They should be in school, at home, somewhere safe. So, Takeo didn't feel anger toward the two young slayers for their desperate pleas. Instead, he grew even more furious at the shadow demon. Playing with people's lives, using others as shields. What do you think human life is? Wolf breathing, fourth form of fine mist began to spread throughout the room. Though Takeo was filled with rage, his face remained composed. As several tendrils of shadow lashed toward him, he calmly severed them with his blades and vanished into the fog. The dense mist obscured everyone's vision, including that of the shadow demon. The demon had lost sight of Takeo. But he didn't panic because he believed he knew exactly who Takeo was targeting. Wolf strike in the mist. Like a predator emerging from the early morning fog, Takeo reappeared beside the shadow demon, twin Nichiren swords drawn. No one knew when he had slipped past the obstruction of the other Demon Slayer Corps members, but in that moment, he was already standing before the demon once more. This boy is fast, the demon thought. But unfortunately for him, he's up against me. The shadow demon smiled inwardly and allowed Takeo to slice off his head. Then, the severed head dissolved into shadow. As the demon's entire body melted into darkness, Takeo's expression grew grim. It wasn't just because the demon had used this method to escape. What truly disturbed him was the similarity to another enemy he despised. The dust demon. The demon's voice echoed again, this time, from the abdomen of a nearby demon slayer. He had used shadow to form a grotesque mouth, which opened and closed as it spoke, delivering words that sounded like praise, but dripped with mockery. Terrifying. Kahihi, so terrifying. You really are a Hashira, aren't you? Perhaps knowing that Takeo wouldn't respond, the shadow demon went on without pause, but even if you are a Hashira, so what? Are you going to strike your own comrades? I'm hiding inside one of your fellow demon slayers right now. So what will you do? Are you going to kill them, too? Mwahahaha. The demon's cackling echoed wildly through the room, clearly delighted by his own idea. Using Demon Slayer Corps members as meat shields. The girl the demon had possessed trembled violently. Tears and snot ran down her face as pure terror overtook her expression. "No, don't, sob. I don't want to die yet, sniff." She sobbed and pleaded, and her desperate cries left Takeo in heavy silence. If it were a demon or someone aiding a demon, Takeo would strike without hesitation. But faced with a comrade being held hostage by a demon, Takeo found it difficult to act. He wasn't decisive enough. Takeo knew this about himself, but he couldn't change it, not yet. After all, he had never taken a human life. Slaying demons was easy. They were enemies, natural enemies of humanity. Monsters that had to be eliminated. Takeo never hesitated when it came to them. There was no psychological burden when he raised his blades. But killing a person, that was different. Humans were his own kind. No one could attack another human so decisively and without remorse unless driven by deep hatred, or unless they were a cold-blooded executioner. Takeo held no grudge against the girl. And he wasn't an executioner. So he couldn't bring himself to strike her now. And even if he did kill her, would that truly destroy the shadow demon? Takeo's gaze shifted to the others in the room. Every one of them was a potential hostage for the demon. Any of them could be possessed next. What a mess. This demon's tactics were troublesome, and it gave Takeo a headache just thinking about it. So, for the time being, he chose to ignore the shadow demon and the girl it had possessed. In a flash, he moved, appearing beside Yoshizuru Asato and pulling him to safety. Unlike the others, Asato had clearly suffered much more cruelly at the hands of the shadow demon. His body was covered in scars, his arms twisted at unnatural angles, and his face was smeared with blood. If Takeo hadn't been familiar with him, he might not have recognized him at all. "How did you end up like this?" After pulling him to safety, Takeo asked in confusion. It had been over half a month since they last parted ways, and this was the state Asato was in when they met again. Asato was a veteran member of the Demon Slayer Corps. He had his own means of surviving in dangerous situations. Logically, the moment he detected signs of a 12 Kazuki demon, he should have reported it immediately and requested assistance from a Hashira. No matter what, he shouldn't have ended up this badly. But Asato didn't answer the question. Instead, in a weak voice, he said to Takeo, You can't save me, hurry, leave me, leave me." "What?" Takeo didn't understand what Asato meant at first. But what happened next made everything painfully clear. Several shadow spikes erupted from Asato's body like needles launched from a hedgehog. Squelch. The shadow thorns pierced through Takeo's Demon Slayer uniform and stabbed into his flesh, passing clean through his body from back to front. In an instant, Takeo resembled a human pincushion. Blood spurted from his wounds, and the long-forgotten sensation of intense pain surged through his nervous system. Ugh! He was injured. This was the first time Takeo had been seriously wounded by a demon since joining the Demon Slayer Corps. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 71, This boy has to die. Ha 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 ha. You've been fooled. Fooled. Ha ha, this is hilarious. Hey. You over there, don't just stand there. Keep writing. Write this scene down. Ha 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 ha. Seeing Takeo's body pierced by the shadow spear, the shadow demon burst into crazed laughter, his hysterical voice echoing throughout the room. Takeo didn't scream in pain, but neither did he move. After stabbing through his flesh, the shadow had solidified inside his body, locking his muscles and rendering him immobile for the moment. Yoshizuru Asato, slumped across Takeo's back, struggled to fall off, trying to dislodge the shadow spikes by shifting his weight. But to Asato's dismay, the shadow thorns remained firmly embedded in Takeo's body. His bloodied face twisted with anxiety and regret. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to stand, barely managing to stay upright as he called out, "Takeo." "I'm fine," Takeo replied, his voice strained. His body had been impaled, his internal organs damaged in multiple places. But fortunately, the shadow hadn't pierced his heart. The injuries lethal to most would take less than half a minute for Takeo to recover from. That's right. His regeneration had been enhanced again. Though still far from the level of Wolverine at his peak, Takeo's healing ability fortified through breathing techniques was approaching that level. If only the shadow thorns could be removed, his body would be fully healed in under a minute. This recovery speed was nearly on par with that of an ordinary demon. But the most troublesome part was that the shadow thorns weren't willing to leave. They burrowed deeper into Takeo's body, trying to seize control of him from the inside. "Are you still pretending to be fine? Ha ha ha. Stop bluffing. You must be in agony right now. You must be dying inside. I deliberately avoided your vital organs just to make you suffer longer. I'm going to torture you. I want that adult to witness with his own eyes as I kill a Hashira. This way, I'll receive even more blessings from that adult. I'll become the new lower rank one, or maybe even rise to the upper ranks. Ha ha ha. Why do you think I stayed here even after the Demon Slayer Corps discovered me? It was all to kill one of you, a Hashira." Convinced that victory was within reach, the shadow demon burst into arrogant, manic laughter. And with that, the real reason for his presence in Mito was clear: he had deliberately stayed behind to slay a Hashira with his own hands. Ridiculous. A real Hashira would be far stronger than Takeo. If a Hashira had come in person, the outcome would likely have been decided in an instant. The only reason Takeo was still struggling against this demon was because his speed wasn't fast enough. If he were quicker, so fast that the shadow demon couldn't react, then the demon wouldn't have had the chance to escape into his shadows in the first place. And that, ultimately, would be the fate of it if any Hashira came here. From this point of view, Takeo was not yet qualified to be a Hashira. That adult. This was the first time Takeo had spoken directly to the demon since entering the room. He looked straight at the shadow demon, its grotesque mouth protruding from the girl's abdomen, and asked, "Are you talking about Muzan Kibutsuji?" The moment he uttered the name, the shadow demon's expression changed drastically. All traces of arrogance vanished, replaced by sheer horror. Fear, rage, and panic twisted his features. "How dare you? How dare you speak that name aloud? Die!" No longer toying with him, the shadow demon immediately went in for the kill. The shadows filling the room transformed into deadly weapons in an instant. Even the shadows piercing Takeo's body bristled with jagged spikes, threatening to impale him from the inside out. But at that exact moment, Takeo forcefully broke free from the shadow thorn's grip. Blood sprayed through the air, his body beneath the Demon Slayer Corps uniform torn and covered in vicious wounds. But Takeo ignored the pain. Wolf breathing, second form, he drew in a deep breath, strengthened his stance, and charged straight toward the girl bound by the shadow demon. Lone Wolf's last stand. His twin Nichiren swords thrust forward at once. Takeo abandoned all defense. Ignoring the oncoming strike from the demon, he plunged both blades toward the girl's abdomen with the fastest, most ferocious strike he could unleash. "Ayah!" A double scream rang out. One scream came from the girl. She cried out in pain, tears flying from her eyes. The other belonged to the shadow demon. He let out a shriek and was forcefully ejected from the girl's body. Takeo seized the opportunity. With explosive strength bursting from his legs, he pushed past the girl and lunged toward the fleeing shadow demon. Wolf breathing, third form, wolf hunt. Countless slashes tore through the air like a pack of wolves chasing down prey, each blade bite aimed at the fleeing shadow demon. But Takeo was still just a little too slow. Among the lower ranks of the 12 Kazuki, the shadow demon was among the fastest. And with the ability to meld into and travel through shadows, he could practically teleport within them. As a result, Takeo's attacks continued to miss by the slightest margins. That tiny difference allowed the demon to escape deeper into the surrounding shadows. Damn it! Damn it! Don't you care about their lives? If you kill me, your comrades will die too. All of them, everyone in this room will die. The shadow demon's voice echoed from within the darkness, furious and desperate. Takeo glanced down at the girl lying in a pool of blood, clutching her abdomen. He clenched his jaw, then said quietly, "Sorry." And with that blades in hand he charged once more toward the demon hiding within the shadows. Perhaps his actions would lead to someone's death. Perhaps that last attack had already doomed the girl. But now that the choice had been made, there was no room for hesitation. As long as he could kill the shadow demon, even if everyone else here had to be sacrificed, it would be worth it. In this moment, Takeo had only one goal in his sights, the shadow demon. Tisk. In that case, seeing that Takeo remained completely unmoved, the shadow demon dropped all pretenses. He immediately detonated the shadow bomb planted inside the girl's body. It was one of his blood demon arts. By embedding a portion of his shadow inside a person, he could control it at will, detonating it from within to shred the host's body. The attack that had pierced through Takeo earlier was a variation of this very technique. Now, under the demon's control, the shadow bomb exploded inside the girl. It hurts so much. She writhed on the ground in agony, her screams echoing as shadows burst violently from inside her body, twisting her frame in unspeakable pain. Takeo didn't look. He couldn't. In his eyes, now blazing with the flames of fury, there was only a single, unwavering intent, to kill the shadow demon. His twin Nichiren swords struck the wall, tearing through countless tendrils of shadow. The shadow demon continued to flee, but despite his growing fear, he was also thinking of how to deal with this red-haired swordsman. By all logic, the boy's injuries, especially the internal damage, should have already rendered him immobile. But why could he still fight as if nothing had happened? More than that, this boy's heart was like solid stone. Even the screams of his injured companions hadn't made his sword hand tremble in the slightest. Are all Hashira in the Demon Slayer Corps like this? It was the first time the shadow demon had encountered someone with such strength, so he naturally assumed Takeo was a Hashira. And truthfully, in earlier times, Takeo's current strength might very well have met the standards of a Hashira. The shadow demon wasn't entirely wrong. But even if Takeo's power exceeded that of the demon, if his attacks couldn't land, they meant nothing. On the other hand, this was the shadow demon's territory. Every shadow projected on the ground or wall was under his control. Realizing that intimidation and manipulation were no longer effective, the shadow demon abandoned the theatrics and chose to attack directly. A thick, black shadow surged beneath Takeo's feet. Forced to evade, Takeo leapt upward. But shadows filled the room floor to ceiling. The moment Takeo jumped, a mass of shadow behind him twisted into the shape of a leg and swept toward his waist and abdomen. Bang! The leg wasn't made purely of shadow. This was the demon himself, using his ability to move between shadows to launch a physical kick at Takeo. The blow landed hard. Takeo's body was hurled across the room, blood spraying violently from his wounds. The impact was brutal. He crashed to the floor with a heavy thud, and the surrounding shadows surged toward him like living creatures, instantly wrapping around his body. Go to hell. The shadow demon had no interest in wasting more words with Takeo, especially after Takeo had spoken the name Muzan Kibutsuji aloud, which filled him with terror. Muzan Kibutsuji possessed the ability to monitor all demons he had created. He could see and hear everything they did. Just hearing someone say his name might have already drawn Muzan's attention to this place. The shadow demon was terrified. If he appeared to be going easy on his opponent, Muzan might think he was deliberately losing, and if that happened, he'd be killed without mercy. So regardless of whatever plan he'd had earlier, there was now only one outcome: this boy had to die. The shadow tendrils wrapped around Takeo surged again, stabbing deep into his flesh. At the same time, the demon conjured a mass of even thicker shadow thorns, aiming them directly at Takeo's head as he lay on the ground. If this strike landed, it would be fatal. This is it, the shadow demon thought. He'll die for sure. But in the blink of an eye, someone burst forward at blinding speed, throwing themselves in front of Takeo at the last possible second. The shadow thorns pierced through the person's body. Scalding blood sprayed over Takeo from the impact. It was Yoshizuru Asato. He had used his body as a shield, standing between Takeo and death. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 72, 72, You Trust Me? Yoshizuru Asato never felt like his story was anything special. He was just like everyone else, like most members of the Demon Slayer Corps. His family had been killed by demons, and he was the only one who survived. Afterward, he was taken in by the Corps, trained in swordsmanship under a cultivator, and eventually became a full-fledged demon slayer. That was it. It was the same story shared by so many within the Corps. Asato never spoke of his past, he simply carried the weight of his hatred for demons in his heart. And so he killed demons again and again, with no thought of stopping. He would keep slaying until the day he died. He had never once regretted it. Not until he met that strange kid Takeo Kamado. But what happened half a month ago, that was something Yoshizuru Asato still regretted. A team member had died. Truthfully, Asato had been in the Corps for many years. He had seen many comrades die. He had led more than a few missions himself, missions in which young demon slayers lost their lives. It shouldn't have shaken him. But this time was different. Because that day, he should have been the one to stay behind. For those comrades who had fallen in battle, Asato had always accepted that their deaths were unavoidable, inevitable, even. He had done everything he could. And while he mourned them, he never regretted those sacrifices. Until now. Only Sakuma Iori, a 15-year-old girl, should have been assigned the task of escorting the wounded team member to safety that day. But in the end, she chose to stay behind. Yoshizuru Asato's only mistake was not insisting he should have made her go while he stayed. There had been plenty of reasons at the time. The demon, the Dirt Child demon, was incredibly powerful, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. The injured person had already been hanging on for a full day. His condition was deteriorating rapidly, and he needed to be taken to the Kakushi for immediate treatment. But no matter the justification, in Yoshizuru Asato's heart, Sakuma had died because of him. That incident left a scar in his heart, one he still hasn't been able to move past. So when Takeo invited him to stay and become Flame Hashira Kyojuro Rengoku's apprentice, Yoshizuru Asato refused. He believed he was unworthy, he didn't have the talent to be trained by the Flame Hashira. He chose to continue slaying demons, thinking it was the only way he could atone for his guilt over what had happened. Then came a mission. He was assigned to lead a team to Mito to investigate the case of several missing scholars. And then he encountered the Shadow Demon, lower rank 3 of the 12 Kizuki. It was immediately clear that this wasn't an opponent they could handle. They didn't even manage to catch sight of the demon's true form before they were nearly wiped out. In the end, only Yoshizuru Asato and 2 other team members survived. The Shadow Demon had already taken control of the other 2 team members and initially intended to control Yoshizuru Asato as well. But because Asato resisted too fiercely, the demon chose instead to torture him publicly to break his spirit in front of the others. That torture lasted for more than a day. Just as Asato was beginning to lose hope, Takeo appeared. The moment he saw Takeo, a flicker of joy passed through his heart. Because he knew how powerful Takeo was, this red-haired kid might really have the strength to kill a member of the 12 Kizuki. But that joy quickly turned into fear. Because while Takeo was strong, Asato also knew that he had never experienced something like this. Takeo could be deceived by his comrades. He might hesitate to act because of them. Asato thought. Reality proved Asato's fears correct. Takeo chose to save him, and walked straight into the shadow demon's trap. He was injured. Because of Yoshizuru Asato. Neither regret nor guilt could fully capture the turmoil in Asato's heart. He should have realized, he should have known that the moment he was rescued, the only right choice was to take his own life. Only then could he have prevented Takeo from stepping into danger. But hesitation, and the instinct to live, held him back from making that choice. He had made the wrong decision again. So now, he stood before Takeo and took the fatal blow in his place. That, at least, was something he could do right. Takeo, can you still move? His body was racked with pain, his life ticking away, but Yoshizuru Asato could still fight. He turned his back to Takeo and asked the question. Takeo gritted his teeth and forced himself to his feet, activating his breathing technique to accelerate his healing. Well enough, he replied. Give me a sword. Asato said. Without hesitation, Takeo handed him one of his Nichiren blades. It was water blue in color, the blade shimmering like a calm river. The handle was also a deep blue, and the tsuba resembled flowing water. It was Sakuma Iora's sword. Asato froze for a moment when he saw it, recognizing it instantly. But he quickly collected himself and looked at Takeo. You trust me? Oh, of course. Then. I'll leave the 12 Kazuki to you. As for the rest. Asato shifted his stance. His gaze locked onto another possessed Demon Slayer Corps member. Leave them to me. Asato shouted as he charged forward, sword slicing through the air like a gust of wind. Only then did Takeo understand what he meant by leave the rest to me. Takeo stared at Asato's back without saying a word. He tightened his grip on his sword and charged straight toward the shadow demon hiding within the wall. Kahihihi, you think adding one more person will be enough to defeat me? Foolish. Go to hell. The shadow demon's voice cackled from the wall as countless tendrils of darkness shot toward Takeo, already battered and bleeding. A wolf's howl echoed through the room, and spectral wolves swept through the air with the wind. Takeo's blade slashed through the oncoming shadows, cutting them down one by one. Weaving between the darkness, Takeo closed in on the wall where the shadow demon lurked and raised his sword high. Wolf breathing, fifth form, eightfold fang. His slashes came faster than the eye could follow, 8 strikes in the blink of an eye, all targeting the precise location where the shadow demon was hiding. But, it was useless. The demon had melted deeper into the wall's shadows, unharmed. Then he struck back. A surge of shadow exploded outward, slamming into Takeo's midsection. Bang! The blow landed directly between his chest and abdomen, fracturing bones and mangling organs. While not fatal for someone like Takeo, it was enough to severely disrupt his movements. No. Mid-air, Takeo clenched his teeth as he glared at the shadow demon's twisted face, still laughing wildly from within the shadows. This isn't working. No matter how strong the technique, it means nothing if it doesn't land. I have to force him out of the shadows, but how? Flame. Would flame breathing work? Fire breathing, should he try fire breathing? Takeo turned his blade, preparing to switch to fire breathing, but then, a faint voice drifted into his ears. It's Kagura. What? It's Kagura, Takeo. Kagura. Suddenly, a series of images flickered before his eyes, a memory that didn't seem to belong to him. A scene he had never lived through appeared vividly in his mind. A boy, slightly older than Takeo and resembling him in appearance, was dancing around a flame in the snow. He wore a ceremonial kimono, like those used in festival rituals. This is the Kagura dedicated to Lord Kagami. A gentle hand rested on his head. Takeo turned and saw a man, frail, emaciated, as if he were wasting away but smiling gently. This is Kagura, Hinokami Kagura, the dance of the fire god, the man said softly. That was how he introduced it to Takeo. Underscore 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 support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 73, 73, Nowhere to Hide. Kagura. Young Takeo softly repeated the name the man had spoken. This was the Kagura dedicated to the god of fire, a sacred dance passed down through generations of the Kamado family. That was how the man beside him explained it? Yes, the Kagura devoted to Lord Kagami was performed by me till now, but it will be performed by Tanjiro every year during the festival from now on, in his honor. Can I dance too? Takeo looked up at the man and asked eagerly. He, then you'll have to ask Tanjiro, the man chuckled. But I think Tanjiro won't say no to you. The man continued to gently stroke Takeo's head as he turned his gaze to the boy in the center, who was practicing the dance of the fire god. That boy was Tanjiro Kamado Takeo's older brother. As Tanjiro performed the Kagura, something went wrong. He suddenly collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Takeo and a few other children quickly rushed over to help him up. But the man sitting by the doorway didn't move. He simply watched with a gentle smile and called out, "Mind your breathing, Tanjiro." "Why yes, father. Breathing is very important." Tanjiro took their father's words to heart, and Takeo, who had been by his side, etched the moment deeply into his memory. Breathe. Kagura. Takeo no longer had time to question why these memories surfaced now. His body moved on instinct. More intense and powerful breath surged from his lungs, replacing his usual wolf breathing in an instant. Surprisingly, the side effects of forcibly switching breathing techniques were much milder than expected. Not only could Takeo still move, he felt stronger and faster than before. This was the Hinokami Kagura, the dance of the fire god, passed down through generations of the Kamado family. The dance of the fire god. Hinokami Kagura. It felt as if flames erupted with each breath, hotter, more violent than the breath of flame. These were flames capable of dispelling darkness and shadows, now blazing along Takeo's blade. Under the searing heat, the shadow demon's laughter abruptly stopped. He stared in shock at Takeo, who had shifted to a different breathing technique and was now surrounded by raging fire, and a sense of dread welled up in his chest. "What is that? What is that? Why am I so afraid?" He only changed his technique. "Wait, he's coming." Paralyzed by a moment of disbelief, the shadow demon failed to react in time, and that hesitation gave Takeo the perfect opportunity to strike back. Scorching flames rippled with every movement, and wherever they touched the ground, they burned away the shadows that had blanketed the entire room. Takeo moved with incredible speed, and the attacks unleashed through Hinokami Kagura were swift and unrelenting. In the blink of an eye, Takeo, who had just been sent flying, was already in front of the wall where the shadow demon was hiding. Hinokami Kagura, burning bone summer sun. His spinning blade struck the wall with explosive force, engulfed in searing flames. A blood-curdling scream rang out immediately from within the wall. What is this? What is this? The shadow demon's form writhed along the surface, and fresh blood gushed from the wounds as if from a broken dam. He couldn't heal. After being struck by a flame-infused blade, the shadow demon's regenerative abilities were suppressed. His wounds refused to close far slower than he expected, and the lingering burn made him writhe in agony. Desperate, the shadow demon thought of a solution: possession. If he hid within a human host, the opponent's blade might not be able to harm him. That was his plan until he looked up, and saw Yoshizuru Asato standing over the corpse of a demon slayer, sword in hand. What? This kid, he actually killed one of his own. Aren't the demon slayer corps strictly forbidden from harming each other? The shadow demon stared, stunned by Asato's action. Yoshizuru Asato wiped the blood from his blade, a twisted grin spreading across his blood-stained face, more terrifying than any demon's. One of the 12 Kisuki, huh? What's the matter? Planning to run again? Damn you. The shadow demon ignored Asato and lunged toward the next person in the room. But at that moment, Asato exploded forward with speed that rivaled even the shadow demons, reaching the scholar the demon intended to possess a split second earlier. Wait, the scholar looked up and saw Asato, just about to beg for his life. But the blade was faster than his voice. Swoosh. Steel flashed through the air. The scholar's head was severed cleanly from his body, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The shadow demon froze in shock, then flew into a rage. You. The Demon Slayer Corps actually strikes down its own. You're no different from us. There weren't many rules within the Demon Slayer Corps, but the few that existed were ironclad. First, never attack your fellow Corps members. Second, never harm innocent humans. And just now, Asato had broken both. Of course, those rules didn't apply to the demon, so he wasn't truly outraged by the act itself. What truly made the shadow demon furious, was that now, only one hiding place remained. Asato had mercilessly slain every human the demon had embedded his shadows in, whether they were comrades or civilians. Asato himself was the only one left. What's wrong, Lower Moon 3? Nowhere left to hide. Asato shouted, his mouth stretched into a wild grin that made him look more terrifying than an actual demon. The shadow demon seethed with rage. He darted through the shadows, finally choosing the only person in the room who still carried one of his shadow seeds. Yes, Asato himself. The shadow demon could travel freely between shadow seeds, but only within a limited range. They had to be close. Otherwise, the puppets he controlled outside could serve as vessels, but not from this distance. His only option now was escape. If he could flee this place, the puppets he'd stationed beyond these walls would be enough to preserve his life. Killing Takeo was no longer a priority. Right now, survival was all that mattered. He had to survive no matter what. Where there's life, there's hope. Ignoring Asato's taunts, the shadow demon plunged into his body. His grinning face emerged from Asato's abdomen as he let out a frenzied laugh. Muahaha. So what? I'm inside him now. What are you going to do? Kill your own comrade? That little brat over there, can he bring himself to strike? This guy matters to you, right? He's your friend, isn't he? You won't do it? Gwahahaha. He cackled madly from within Asato. This was the weakness of humans. They were ruled by sentiment, blinded by foolish emotions like family, friendship, and love. But when your friends and loved ones are hurt right in front of you, no matter how cold-hearted you are, anger will inevitably surge forth. Once a loved one becomes a puppet of the shadow ghost, it's difficult, nearly impossible, for anyone to strike them down directly. The shadow ghost had used this tactic to escape from demon slayers before he even became one of the 12 Kizuki. And now, he was doing the same thing again. He thought he had already secured victory. But what he didn't expect was that the moment Asato was possessed, he suddenly adjusted his breathing and distributed it throughout his entire body. At that moment, the shadow demon sensed something was wrong. Hey, it's breathing, right? Asato's voice echoed like a devil's whisper in the shadow demon's ears. You can't control me, only torture me, because I've filled every inch of my body with concentrated breathing. It interferes with your shadows, doesn't it? You. What are you planning to do? The shadow demon could feel it. The body he had just entered now felt like a cage, tight, suffocating, and inescapable. It was the breathing technique. Yoshizuru Asato's concentrated breathing had trapped him. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 74, Go Become a Hashira. From the very beginning, Yoshizuru Asato had been thinking about one thing. Why didn't the shadow demon control him the same way it controlled the others? Why was he only being tortured here, instead of turned into a puppet? At first, Asato couldn't figure it out. But after carefully recalling everything that had happened since encountering the shadow demon and watching the battle with Takeo, he started to understand. The demon hadn't possessed him. It hadn't even planted a shadow seed in Takeo's body. Was it because it didn't want to? No. It was because it couldn't. The one thing Asato and Takeo had in common was that they both practiced total concentration breathing. And it was precisely this breathing technique that prevented the shadow demon from fully controlling Asato. Asato realized this. Then, he came up with a solution. Kill everyone who carried the shadow demon's shadow seeds, leaving only himself. Then, by using the breathing technique the demon feared most, he could trap the demon inside his own body. And what he needed to do next was simple. Takeo. What are you waiting for? Yoshizuru Asato roared. Takeo, who had been frozen in shock ever since seeing the shadow demon possess Asato, stood there momentarily paralyzed and uncertain what to do. Takeo gripped the sword tightly, staring at Yoshizuru Asato, and asked the question he already knew the answer to, Asato, what are you trying to do? His hands trembled slightly around the hilt. He admitted it, he was afraid. He was terrified of losing Asato, the man who had first guided him into the Demon Slayer Corps. Even more than that, he was afraid of losing a friend, someone who had stood by his side, someone he could laugh and talk with. But fear was meaningless here. At this moment, fear and hesitation were nothing but useless emotions. Asato's life was already counting down. He knew it, and the shadow demon knew it too. And it was precisely because of this that the demon now felt fear. Don't you dare! The shadow demon shrieked. If I die, he dies too. Don't you dare! The same 12 Kazuki that had been so arrogant just moments ago was now showing clear signs of terror. It was fear not unlike Takeo's, but also entirely different. Yoshizuru Asato said nothing further. He knew Takeo couldn't bring himself to strike a fellow comrade. That thought brought him both relief, and a hint of disappointment. In battles against demons, it was all too common to face comrades who had been possessed or controlled. In those moments, the ability to make swift, ruthless decisions was the line between life and death. Takeo wasn't decisive enough, not yet. But perhaps that was a good thing. If Takeo could truly kill his own comrades without the slightest hesitation or guilt, Asato would be forced to wonder whether this kid was still human or already something closer to the demons they fought. It didn't matter if Takeo couldn't do it. That's what Yoshizuru Asato thought. I'm helping him. This worthless life of mine, the one I've managed to cling to for so long, it's finally time for it to serve its purpose. Asato gripped the Nichiren sword in his hand, pressing the blade against his own neck. Takeo, remember me. Asato. Remember me. Remember this moment. Remember exactly how you feel right now. And then, go slay demons. Go become a Hashira, Takeo. The instant Asato finished speaking, he drew the blade across his own neck without hesitation. Ah! The shadow demon's agonized scream echoed alongside the sound of Asato's blood spraying through the air. The shadow coiled around his body writhed violently, as the demon's true form was forcibly dragged from the darkness. What have you done? Look what you've done. The shadow demon had been anchored to Asato's body. Even as Asato teetered on the edge of death, he used the very last of his strength, his final breath, to trap the demon, locking it in place and preventing it from escaping any further. The demon struggled, pulling with every ounce of its strength, desperate to flee to escape the burning blade now wielded by Takeo. But the shadow demon couldn't. In those eyes engraved with the mark of the 12 Kazuki Lower Moon 3, there was no longer a trace of the majesty a member of the 12 demon moons should have. There was only fear. A fear that came from the very core, the blood, the soul. A fear of the flames burning on the sun blade. Hinokami Kagura, tears slid silently down Takeo's face. His expression showed neither sorrow nor joy, no pain, no happiness. There was only a terrifying, absolute calm. His figure surged forward, closing the distance to Yoshizuru Asato, as crimson blood flowed freely from the wounds on his body, blending with the scorching flames that wrapped around him. In less than the blink of an eye, Takeo stood before the shadow demon. The demon wanted to beg for mercy. His mouth opened, but he was far too late. No sound came out. The flaming wheel spun from Takeo's blade, starting at the demon's neck, tracing a perfect circle through the air. Flames roared. Heads flew. Blood rained down. On that day, the head of lower rank 3 of the 12 Kazuki was severed from his body and hit the ground with a heavy thud. Flame wheel. The surrounding shadows dissolved, scattering like dust caught in a strong wind, revealing the room's true appearance once again. Asato, not yet fully gone, smiled in relief when he saw Takeo finish off the shadow demon. Then, Yoshizuru Asato closed his eyes. There were no final words. No lingering conversations. No last looks exchanged. This was how ordinary people die. Without ceremony. Without fanfare. After closing their eyes, their breathing simply ceases, and that's it. The shadow demon's severed head slowly began to disintegrate. No one would ever know what the tears still lingering in its eyes truly meant. Perhaps it was regret for a past long forgotten. Perhaps it was nothing more than the sheer terror of death. But it didn't matter anymore. And Takeo didn't care about the feelings of a demon. Even though he had slain one of the 12 Kazuki, he felt no joy. No sense of accomplishment. Nothing. He knelt down beside Asato's lifeless body, staring blankly at the corpse in front of him. He didn't even feel like crying, yet the tears came anyway, pouring down his face like floodgates breaking. Why? Why am I crying? He hadn't cried when Sakuma Iora died. So why was he crying now, for Asato? Takeo didn't understand. And right now, his mind was too clouded to figure it out. He had always known this world was cruel. He'd prepared himself mentally for it, or so he thought. But now, it was painfully clear that his so-called mental preparation was far from enough. Unlike Iora's death, Asato's death was brutal. Agonizing. He had ended his own life with his own blade. Just how much determination, how much courage, did it take to do something like that? Even Takeo, with his extraordinary healing abilities, probably wouldn't have been able to make such a decisive choice. Just how much resolve, how much conviction, did Yoshizuru Asato possess to do something like this? Was sheer hatred for demons enough to drive someone to this? As this question surfaced in Takeo's mind, he turned to look at Asato's body. That's enough. Takeo thought. No matter what happened in the past, no matter what anyone else had done, at least right now, there was still an unshakable, burning hatred for demons in his heart. Hanako's story had taught him that demons were not worthy of pity. Iora's death had taught him that when facing demons, he must fight with everything, he had no holding back. And now, Asato's death, carved something even deeper into Takeo's soul. It taught him that no matter the cost, no matter the enemy, he must do whatever it takes to kill demons. Even if it means sacrificing himself. Takeo sat quietly next to Asato's body, unmoving. He just sat there. He didn't know how much time had passed. But eventually, under the guidance of the Kajigai Crow, the Kakushi arrived. Someone else arrived alongside the Kakushi. A tall man with 2 chained Nikarin swords strapped across his back, a jeweled forehead guard adorning his brow, and a flamboyant presence that was impossible to ignore. He suddenly appeared beside Takeo, scanning the area. His sharp eyes finally settled on Takeo, who sat quietly next to the corpse. Oi, kid. Where's the 12 Kazuki? Takeo didn't answer. He simply kept his gaze fixed on the body before him, not even glancing up at the man. The man clicked his tongue, scratching the back of his head in mild annoyance. TCH. Another gloomy little brat. Shaking his head, he turned his attention away from Takeo and surveyed the room. Obvious signs of battle were everywhere, the remnants of a fierce and desperate fight. Then the man asked again, "Oi, kid. Don't tell me, you're the one who took down the 12 Kazuki." It sounded like a question, but his tone carried little doubt, as if he'd already pieced together exactly what had happened. Takeo still said nothing. Just like before, not a single word left his lips. Underscore support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, chapter 75, getting 2B's powers. It was that familiar space of consciousness again. Takeo found himself here once more. He held two swords in his hands, but the playful expression he'd worn when sparring with 2B was completely gone. 2B seemed to sense the change as well. This time, she didn't attack immediately. Instead, she stood still, silently locking eyes with Takeo. Though her eyes were covered by a black visor, he could feel her gaze meeting his. Neither of them spoke. Takeo said nothing. And 2B, as usual, remained wordless. She hadn't uttered a single word since her appearance. For a long while, Takeo simply stared at her. Eventually, he shifted his gaze down to the two swords he gripped tightly. The blades were identical to his real Nichiren swords. They weren't pristine, far from it. Both bore clear marks of battle. One even had a visible crack running along the edge, a scar left from previous fights against demons. In this space of consciousness, whatever Takeo was most familiar with would manifest as projections. That was why the swords here mirrored the very ones he wielded in the real world. Takeo studied the worn blades for a moment longer. Then he slowly raised his head and looked back at 2B. His voice was quiet, steady but heavy. "I've lost another friend." 2B said nothing. With his eyes lowered, hidden beneath the shadow of his hair, Takeo spoke softly, his voice heavy. "He died, in a battle with a demon. Just like my last friend. There were many reasons for his death. The demon was too cunning. It used hostages, it was fast." Takeo paused for a moment, then continued, his voice tightening. "But those aren't the real reasons. The real reason is, I'm too weak." He slowly lifted his head. A faint glimmer flickered in his eyes beneath the shadows as he admitted, "Yeah. I'm too weak. I'm not as strong as I thought I was. I haven't worked nearly as hard as I should have. Otherwise, the Hinokami Kagura. I should have remembered it a long time ago. Maybe, if I'd remembered it a day earlier, or an hour, or even just a minute sooner, my friend wouldn't have died. But, reality doesn't have a maybe." Takeo let out a long breath, lifting his gaze fully to face 2B standing before him. He wanted to say something more. There were so many things tangled in his throat. But in the end, all those words, all those emotions, condensed into a single sentence: "I want to apologize to you, 2B, because today, I'm going to kill you. Right here." The instant the words left his mouth, Takeo surged forward, his body igniting with dancing flames like a fire dragon racing toward 2B. Faster than before. Stronger than ever. The Hinokami Kagura placed a tremendous burden on the body. If the body wasn't trained to withstand it, every use would tear muscle, strain organs, and damage the very bones holding the body together. Maybe it was because of this that his father, Tanjiro Kamado, had died so young. But for Takeo, that cost might as well not exist. Will it burden the body? Will it cause damage? With his enhanced recovery ability, none of that mattered anymore. The deep, penetrating wounds from his fight with the Shadow Demon had already healed completely within a single day. Just one day after that brutal battle, Takeo was back at his peak. That was why he could wield the Hinokami Kagura without hesitation, without restraint. The sheer power and speed granted by the Hinokami Kagura far exceeded anything ordinary breathing techniques could offer. Takeo's strength, his speed, both now towered over his former self. For the first time, he could fight 2B on equal footing head to head. Blades clashed, sending arcs of fire through the air. Shockwaves rippled through the burning aura of the Hinokami Kagura, colliding with Takeo as he charged forward, undeterred. The sharp gleam of virtuous contract clashed violently against Takeo's dual Nichiren swords. 2B tried to reach for the massive greatsword strapped to her back White Promise, but Takeo's unrelenting assault left her no opening to draw it. The tide had turned. After being pushed back for so long, Takeo was finally the one pressing forward. He was the one suppressing 2B now. The flames blazed even hotter. His fiery red hair, his crimson eyes, they burned as fiercely as the inferno around him, the color intensified by the firelight. His swords practically dripped with flame, as if stained red with molten steel. Crossing his twin blades, Takeo unleashed an attack that roared like a feral beast. Wolf breathing, sixth form, fusing the immense power of the Hinokami Kagura with the breathing technique he had developed himself, Takeo transcended his limits. This was the apex of his strength, his most powerful move to date. Flame Wolf. A woo. A faint wolf howl echoed within the blaze as Takeo was surrounded by the fiery silhouette of a wolf. Within the collision of wind and fire, the blazing wolf wielding both elements lunged forward, its flaming jaws clamping down onto 2B's body. At that instant, Takeo's twin blades crossed, one on either side of 2B's neck. Without hesitation, he struck. Her head, still wrapped in the black visor, was severed cleanly. It flew into the air, spinning through the void of the consciousness space. But Takeo didn't relax. Not even for a moment. His swords flipped, and he immediately followed up with another attack, wolf breathing, fifth form, eightfold fang. He hadn't forgotten 2B's ability restart, nor the fact that she could regenerate her entire body. And just as he expected, a new head was already forming atop 2B's body. The seamless reconstruction, the flawless mechanical precision, it was so uncanny that Takeo felt, for a brief moment, like he was fighting a Terminator. But he didn't let up. The flurry of strikes from eightfold fang rained down like a violent storm. Countless wolf fang-shaped slashes carved into 2B's body in the blink of an eye, bite after bite, relentless and merciless. Desperate, 2B summoned the last of her strength. Her hand shot back, gripping the massive sword strapped to her back. With one swift motion, she drew White Promise. Its enormous blade swung down in a wide arc, aiming directly for Takeo's head. She wasn't trying to kill him outright, she was trying to force him to retreat. To buy herself even a moment to breathe. But Takeo didn't dodge. Instead, he tilted his head just enough to avoid a fatal strike and then let his shoulder take the full force of White Promise. His enhanced regeneration kicked into overdrive. Strengthened muscle, reinforced bone, and flesh mending at rapid speed allowed him to trap the massive sword within his own body, locking it in place. This is the final blow. Takeo roared. His blades flashed once more, aiming at the fully regenerated 2B. Wolf breathing, first form, wolf fang. His twin swords crossed like the jaws of a hunting wolf, snapping open and shut, wind swirling with embers as the attack struck true. 2B's head was severed once again. This time, it didn't grow back. Restart could only be triggered once within a limited span. Takeo didn't know the exact cooldown time, but no matter how short it was, it certainly couldn't activate twice within a single minute. And so this time the fight was truly over. Takeo stood still, panting lightly, as 2B's lifeless body collapsed to the ground. From beginning to end, she hadn't said a single word. Strangely, it reminded him of Uncle Logan, the very first figure he had fought in this consciousness space. Just like her, not a single word had been exchanged. Perhaps, the characters that appeared in this place weren't capable of speaking to him at all. Maybe. Takeo thought about it as he watched 2B's body dissolve into black particles, those fragments of data flowing into his own body. He then sat down cross-legged, closing his eyes as he began to accept 2B's inheritance. Even though he had defeated 2B, it didn't mean her abilities were useless to him. Far from it. Not only was the bullet time effect brought by overclocking incredibly valuable, but the two other skills, shockwave and no injury blood recovery, would drastically enhance his combat ability. Especially the latter. When combined with Takeo's own regenerative abilities, it meant that, under certain circumstances, his recovery speed could rival or even surpass that of a demon. And then, there was Restart. This was the real jackpot. Only after fully absorbing 2B's inheritance did Takeo realize that Restart wasn't the same as it was in the game. There, the activation chance had been a mere 50%. Now, it was 100%. No matter how severe the injury, even a fatal blow, as long as his body hadn't been completely reduced to ashes, Restart would trigger a second life. A genuine, guaranteed second life. And that wasn't all. As he dug deeper, Takeo uncovered chip-based skills he hadn't noticed before in 2B's repertoire. One was extended evasion distance, and the other was charged attack. Both were excellent additions. The first skill, extended evasion distance, allowed Takeo to dodge farther, though in practical terms, it essentially translated to faster dodge speed. The second, charged attack, let him unleash attacks at 300% of their normal power after charging. As he sorted through and summarized the abilities he had gained, Takeo's expression remained calm. He felt no excitement over acquiring new powers, nor sorrow over having slain a familiar figure. He simply sat cross-legged in the space of consciousness, quietly watching the tree in front of him. When he noticed the tree gradually fade and no new figures appeared, Takeo slowly closed his eyes. And with that, his consciousness returned to reality. _________ support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 76, 76, Yubayashiki Kaguya. The midday sun shone down on the courtyard. In a small, traditional Japanese-style courtyard, Takeo sat quietly in an inconspicuous corner, his twin Nichiren swords laid neatly on either side of him. From the adjacent room, a young man with a scar on his forehead and clouded, sightless eyes, supported by a beautiful woman, walked forward to the central position, facing the courtyard. In the direction the young man was facing, a group of individuals dressed in distinctive uniforms stood lined up side by side. There were 9 of them in total, standing neatly in formation, bowing respectfully toward the young man. Among them, the ones Takeo recognized were Rengoku Kyojuro, Kenroji Mitsurai, and Tokaido Muichiro, all familiar faces. The others. Their identities were obvious. They were the Hashira, the 9 pillars that supported the Demon Slayer Corps. The reason they had gathered here today was for the Demon Slayer Corps' semi-annual meeting. This was a conference held every 6 months, presided over by Yubayashiki Kaguya, the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. The current Hashira assembled to discuss recent developments concerning demons, updates on Muzan Kibutsuji's whereabouts, and the situation within each of their assigned regions. At the last Hashira meeting, only 8 had attended. But now, all 9 were present. And beyond that, there was one more person, someone who, at a glance, seemed unrelated to the meeting. The young man inside the house, not very old and marked by a strange purple scar on his forehead, spoke softly once everyone had gathered. "Good morning, everyone. The weather is lovely today." His voice was gentle, so gentle that just hearing it seemed to purify one's heart. Hearing this, Takeo finally lifted his head and looked directly at the young man sitting before them. This was the head of the Demon Slayer Corps, the 21-year-old leader of the Yubayashiki family, Yubayashiki Kaguya. Takeo had seen him once before at the funerals of fallen Demon Slayer Corps members. What had left the deepest impression on Takeo was that Kaguya could recite the name of every single fallen member, including Sakuma Iori. Even though Takeo could no longer remember exactly what Yabayashiki had said to him back then, the memory of that gentle yet commanding presence remained vivid in his mind. Now, this was their second meeting. As the master spoke, no one present interrupted. All waited quietly for him to continue. Yabayashiki Kaguya went on, his tone warm yet steady. First of all, I am truly happy that we are holding this semi-annual Hashira meeting without having lost a single member. What makes me even happier is that after these past 6 months, the 9 pillars are finally assembled. As he spoke, his gaze turned toward Tokaido Muichiro. Muichiro, please step forward. Even Tokaido, who usually seemed detached from everything, showed a rare flicker of nervousness at this moment. Takeo watched as Muichiro walked to the front and bowed respectfully to Yabayashiki Kaguya. His posture and gaze carried genuine reverence toward his master. It was clear that Yabayashiki Kaguya held a very special place in his heart. 7 days ago, Muichiro-kun personally slew one of the 12 Kazuki and became qualified to ascend to the rank of Hashira, Kaguya said gently. I had the Kajigai crows deliver this news to you all. Therefore, Muichiro-kun will become the 9th Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps, the Mist Hashira. Or rather, that was supposed to be the case. As he spoke, Yabayashiki Kaguya turned his gaze towards someone else. Takeo-kun, please step forward. Hearing his name, Takeo picked up his swords, stepped forward, and stood side by side with Tokaido Muichiro, mirroring his posture. No matter what, the person standing before him was the leader of the Demon Slayer Corps. Basic courtesy was non-negotiable. Yabayashiki Kaguya continued, his voice as warm as always, but just 3 days ago, Takeo-kun also personally slew one of the 12 Kazuki, achieving the qualifications to become a Hashira. However, this presents a problem. During the same period, 2 new candidates have appeared, yet there is only 1 vacant Hashira position. This has never happened before in the history of the Demon Slayer Corps. Of course, having more Hashira would only strengthen the Corps, so my personal inclination is to grant both of them the title. However, I would still like to hear your opinions. Though Kaguya possessed the authority to make the final decision, he always sought the counsel of the Hashira. To him, every member of the Corps was equal. There was no distinction of superior or subordinate, only comrades fighting for the same cause. The Hashira deeply respected their lord. Now that Yabayashiki Kaguya had confirmed that both had slain members of the 12 Kazuki, none of them seemed to have any objections to allowing both to become Hashiras simultaneously. After bowing to the Lord and expressing their reverence, the Hashira began to voice their thoughts one after another. The first to speak was the person Takeo was most familiar with, Rengoku Kyojuro. As always, his tone was cheerful and his voice thunderously loud. Standing proudly at the center as though he were the natural leader of the group, Kyojuro responded with unwavering enthusiasm, as long as it strengthens the Demon Slayer Corps, I have no objection to adding 1 or even more Hashira. Therefore, I wholeheartedly support the Lord's decision. The next to speak was one of the only 2 female Hashira. It wasn't Kenroji Mitsurai, but rather a woman who radiated a calm, elegant presence tinged with a subtle sense of danger, like a butterfly fluttering near poison. Her name was Koko Shinobu, the insect Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. It is a standing rule within the Corps, anyone who slays a member of the 12 Kazuki is qualified to become a Hashira, Shinobu said, her tone gentle yet firm. Since both have accomplished this, there should be no objections to both ascending to Hashira. Her voice was soft, different from the gentle warmth of Kaguya-sama. It was a delicate, ethereal sort of softness, like the voice of a kind older sister next door. The next person to speak was the tallest among the Hashira. He bore a distinct, harsh scar stretching horizontally across his forehead like a headband. His eyes were devoid of pupils, only white sclera remained, giving him an appearance that suggested blindness. Clad in the standard Demon Slayer Corps uniform, a grass-green haori draped over his shoulders. On either side of the haori were the kanji for Namu Amida Butsu, a Buddhist chant meaning I sincerely take refuge in Amida Buddha. A rosary was wrapped around his massive right hand, further confirming his identity as a devout monk. This was the stone Hashira, Jomei Jima, the eldest and most senior among the current Hashira. His towering frame radiated not intimidation, but a profound sense of compassion and spiritual calm, and immovable presence, as solid as stone. Ah, how pitiful, to bear the responsibility of a Hashira at such a young age. Though Jomei Jima only said this softly, tears already welling in his eyes, his tone made it clear that he had no objection to the Lord's decision. However, not everyone among the Hashira agreed so readily with Tokaido Muichiro and Takeo's promotions. Among the group, a man with heterochromatic eyes, one green, one yellow, and bandages covering the lower half of his face suddenly spoke, I have no objection to the Lord's decision, but his sharp gaze turned toward the two standing in front, and he pointed directly at them. Did they truly kill a member of the 12 Kizuki with their own hands? Yabayashiki Kaguya answered gently, Muichiro-kun faced a member of the 12 Kizuki alone and killed it. As for Takeo-kun, Kaguya turned his eyes toward Kamado Takeo and continued, according to the Hidden Core's report, while there were several demon slayers present at the scene, their analysis determined that Takeo was the only one capable of moving and fighting at the time. Furthermore, after slaying the lower rank 3, Takeo exhibited no serious injuries. This alone proves that his strength surpassed that of the 12 Kizuki. He then paused briefly before smiling softly and said to Takeo, of course, my words alone may not be enough to convince everyone. Takeo-kun, are you willing to describe the circumstances yourself? Kaguya was giving Takeo an opportunity, a chance to affirm his own qualifications. As long as Takeo declared that he had indeed slain the 12 Kizuki on his own, his position as the next Hashira would be secured beyond doubt. However, Takeo bowed slightly and spoke clearly, reporting to the Lord. His tone was calm, unwavering. I was not the only one responsible for the death of lower rank 3. Yoshizuru Isato also played a decisive role during that battle. So, strictly speaking, it was Yoshizuru Isato and I who defeated the 12 Kizuki together. It was not a victory earned by my hands alone. Takeo answered without hesitation. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 77, 77, Want to have a match? Takeo remained calm as he answered. His response immediately drew the attention of everyone present. Yabayashiki Kaguya turned his dim yet gentle eyes toward Takeo. Despite his deteriorating vision, he could still see certain things clearly in this moment. His voice was soft but carried undeniable weight as he spoke, Yoshizuru Isato. I know he was a very brave man. When he was possessed by a member of the 12 Kizuki, he willingly sacrificed himself to create an opportunity for you. I recognize his courage and his contribution. But, Takeo, I can still tell who truly killed the lower moon 3. His gaze deepened. Are you certain, you wish to share this credit with Isato? After all, Isato was already gone. No matter how much recognition was added to his name, it could no longer benefit him personally. On the other hand, if Takeo chose to accept full credit, he would become the youngest Hashira in the history of the Demon Slayer Corps, a monumental achievement. Besides, it had been Yoshizuru Isato's wish for Takeo to rise to the rank of Hashira. By that logic, Takeo had every reason to accept the promotion without hesitation. Yet, despite that, Takeo stood firm, yes. The defeat of lower rank 3 was achieved by both Senior Isato and me together. It wasn't my victory alone. In truth, even with Takeo's modesty, his qualifications wouldn't be denied. History within the Demon Slayer Corps had seen other instances where the 12 Kizuki were slain through the combined effort of multiple swordsmen, yet only one was ultimately elevated to Hashira. For example, the current Wind Hashira, Sanamai Shinazugawa, had once slain a lower moon demon with the help of a close companion. Without that support, Sanamai likely would not have survived that battle. This was neither unprecedented nor unreasonable. The same applied to Takeo. No, in fact, Takeo's situation was even more remarkable than Sanamai's back then. Because in this battle, he was the one pursuing the 12 Kizuki. It was the demon who had been forced to flee. The Hidden Corps reconstructed the entire battle by comparing the physical traces left at the scene with the testimonies of the survivors who had previously been controlled by the demon. All the evidence pointed to one fact: it was Takeo who relentlessly hunted down the lower rank 3, forcing the demon to continuously switch hosts in a desperate attempt to survive. Yoshizuru Asato played an important role, a crucial role, but not the decisive one. Even without Asato's help, the shadow demon would have inevitably died at Takeo's hands. That was the very reason Yubayashiki Kaguya had proposed elevating Takeo to the rank of Hashira. However, becoming a Hashira wasn't something that could be forced upon someone. If a swordsman adamantly refused, not even Yubayashiki Kaguya could compel them to accept the title. Besides, Kaguya could clearly see it, since the death of Yoshizuru Asato, a deep, unhealable scar had formed in Takeo's heart. A wound that first appeared after the death of Sakuma Iori, then tore open wider with Asato's sacrifice, and now sat heavy upon Takeo's soul, refusing to heal. Anyone could see it, especially Kaguya. In the 3 days Takeo had stayed at the Butterfly Estate, Yubayashiki Kaguya had never once seen him smile. And yet, Kyojuro had clearly described him as a lively, spirited boy. Yubayashiki Kaguya gazed deeply at Takeo for a long moment. Finally, he let out a soft sigh and stopped pressing the matter. Turning his head slightly, he looked toward Tokaido Muichiro and then back at Takeo. In that case, Takeo-kun, please continue serving as an ordinary swordsman for the time being. Kaguya's tone was gentle, but his words carried the weight of a decision made. Takeo didn't respond. Silently, he rose to his feet, picked up his Nichiren swords, and turned to leave. What followed next was the pillar meeting. And since he was not a Hashira, he had no right to participate. He quietly made his way outside. No one stopped him. Still, many eyes followed his figure as he left, especially one person who had remained silent the entire time. The water Hashira, Gyutomyoka. His gaze lingered on Takeo, heavy and unreadable, but he said nothing and made no move to intervene. Standing outside, Takeo walked toward the courtyard. Bathed in the noonday sunlight, he stood quietly, his gaze fixed on the river flowing in the distance, watching it in silence. Time passed, how much, he didn't know. Then, the sliding doors opened, signaling the end of the pillar meeting. Rengoku Kyojuro was the first to step out. He immediately spotted Takeo. Flashing his trademark fiery, exuberant grin, Kyojuro strode over and gave Takeo a long, thoughtful look. His burning, determined eyes scanned Takeo up and down, then, as if deciding something, he suddenly declared with unwavering enthusiasm, "I have news. There's a demon near Nagano suspected to be one of the 12 Kizuki. I'll take this mission for you." Even though Takeo hadn't told him a single thing, somehow, Kyojuro understood. He knew exactly what Takeo wanted to do. It wasn't that Takeo refused to become a Hashira. He just couldn't accept doing it by taking the 100% credit and taking some credit that belonged to Yoshizuru Asato. If another of the 12 Kizuki truly appeared, then without question Takeo would go. He had to go. Kyojuro understood perfectly, so he took the initiative to claim the mission involving the 12 Kizuki. This time, Takeo would be the one leading the team. "Thank you." Takeo offered his thanks sincerely. He truly meant it. Since the day they'd met, Kyojuro Flame Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps had helped him more than anyone else. He had taught Takeo the correct way to breathe, helped him familiarize himself with his own power, gifted him a Haori, and now, he was giving him another chance. A chance to hunt down a member of the 12 Kazuki and rightfully claim the title of Hashira. Takeo didn't know how to properly express his gratitude. All he could do now, was not disappoint. He had to live up to Kyojuro's expectations. He had to eliminate the 12 Kazuki and step forward as a pillar. It was also the final wish of the late Yoshizuru Isato. After Takeo expressed his thanks, Kyojuro didn't leave immediately. He continued to look at Takeo for a long moment. Then, lowering his voice slightly, he spoke, his tone firm but filled with warmth. Don't dwell too much on the sacrifice of your comrades. In the Demon Slayer Corps, the loss of companions is an everyday reality. If it truly weighs on you. Kyojuro's fiery eyes burned with resolve. Then make sure. From now on, don't let anyone die in front of you. Takeo tightened his grip on the hilt of the sword hanging at his waist. He didn't respond with words, just a small, firm nod. A vow. After joining the Demon Slayer Corps, everyone had to be prepared to die at any moment, even the Hashira. It didn't matter if you survived this fight. There was always the next one, and the one after that, and the one after that. Death and blood were the daily reality for the Demon Slayer Corps. It was normal to grieve, but you couldn't let yourself be trapped by it. If you truly didn't want to see any of your comrades fall, there was only one way. Become stronger. Stronger than anyone. Strong enough to protect everyone. Just as Kyojuro had once told Takeo back at the Rengoku household, become stronger. Stronger, strong enough to protect everyone. As Kyojuro spoke to Takeo, another unexpected figure approached. Both Takeo and Kyojuro turned to look. It was Tomioka-jiyu, the water Hashira. He wore his usual stoic expression, quietly walking up to them without a word. The moment he arrived, his gaze landed on Takeo. Tomioka-jiyu stared at him in silence. Takeo wasn't sure what the man wanted, so all he could do was meet his gaze. The two locked eyes for what felt like an eternity. Neither spoke. Neither looked away. Eventually, Takeo couldn't stand the oppressive silence anymore. Jiyu's cold, wordless presence felt almost like a form of psychological torture. Master Tomioka, Takeo finally asked, his tone bordering on exasperation, is there something I can help you with? Kyojuro chimed in loudly, that's right, Tomioka. If you don't say anything, how are we supposed to know what you're thinking? Tomioka-jiyu glanced at Kyojuro, his ever-loud companion, and finally turned his eyes back to Takeo. You. He paused mid-sentence. Takeo stared at him, exasperated. What about me? Do you know? Tanjiro Kamado? Jiyu finally asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Takeo froze. A familiar figure flashed through his mind, the boy he'd seen in his memories. Tanjiro Kamado. Nezuko Kamado. They were the only two blood relatives he had left in this world. For someone like Takeo, who had been an orphan in his previous life, there was no one who longed for the warmth of family more than him. So when he first learned that his siblings still existed in this world, his young body and his heart had little resistance. It didn't take much for him to fully accept the bond of family with Tanjiro and Nezuko. But that was before. Now, Takeo no longer held the same eagerness to meet Tanjiro Kamado and Nezuko Kamado as he once did. In fact, he didn't want to see them at all. Why? Because meeting them here within the Demon Slayer Corps likely signified the beginning of this world's story. And Takeo hadn't forgotten what his old roommate once called this world, Hashira Slayer. Once the story truly began, the pillars he knew, the ones he respected and cared for, were all destined to die. He didn't want that to happen. He didn't want to witness Kyojuro's death. He didn't want to see Mitsurai fall. Even Muichiro, though not particularly close to him, was someone he had sparred with, someone he could call a friend. Takeo didn't want to watch him sacrifice himself either. In Takeo's eyes now, the name Tanjiro Kamado was no longer just the name of a brother or a blood relative. It was a harbinger of death. The death of the Hashira. Should I say I don't know him? Takeo briefly considered. But no, that was impossible. Jiyu had already seen Tanjiro, and Takeo's appearance bore too much resemblance to him. Both had crimson hair, crimson eyes. If he claimed not to know him, no one would believe it. Why should I lie? After thinking it over, Takeo asked Tomioka Jiyu quietly, "Where is he now?" He didn't answer whether he knew Tanjiro or not. He simply asked where the other party was. Tomioka Jiyu replied without hesitation, "Training under Master Urokodake." Master Urokodake. Takeo hadn't expected to hear that name again at this moment. "So, you too?" Tomioka seemed about to ask something further. But Takeo interrupted him and said directly, "When he attends the final selection, please let me know, Master Tomioka." "Thank you." "Understood." This time, Tomioka Jiyu didn't press further. Even he could understand the relationship between Takeo and Tanjiro after hearing those words. There was no need to ask anything more. It was better to write a letter right away and inform Tanjiro of this news, something that would surely bring him joy. Takeo didn't stay any longer. He turned and left, no longer looking back at Tomioka. Whatever relationship Tomioka and Tanjiro shared didn't matter to him. At this moment, there was only one person ahead of him. Coincidentally, that person was walking toward him as well. It was Tokaido Muichiro. Having just become the Mist Hashira, Tokaido Muichiro had already adapted to his new identity. His face remained calm, devoid of any particular emotion. Among the four present, aside from Kyojuro, the other three wore equally expressionless faces, making Kyojuro seem almost out of place. But Kyojuro didn't mind at all. He glanced at Muichiro, then at the wooden sword in his hand, and asked cheerfully, "You two planning to spar?" Muichiro didn't answer Kyojuro. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Takeo and asked directly, "Want to have a match?" "Yeah. I was thinking the same." Looking straight into Muichiro's calm, unblinking eyes, Takeo replied softly. Underscore support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO, Chapter 78, Fighting Muichiro again. Tokaido Muichiro wanted to spar with Takeo again. And Takeo felt exactly the same. His reason was simple: he wanted to win, just once, in a fair and decisive manner. The last time they sparred, it hadn't been a victory for Takeo. Muichiro had admitted defeat, but at no point had Takeo considered it a win. Yes, Takeo hadn't lost last time, but he hadn't truly won, either. At least, that's how he saw it. So when he arrived here and crossed paths with Muichiro again, the thought surfaced immediately and, as it turned out, Muichiro had the exact same idea. Both of them wanted a rematch. Takeo didn't particularly care what was driving Muichiro's motivation. Whether their reasons aligned or not didn't matter as long as they could fight. And no doubt, Muichiro felt the same. They quickly found a spacious clearing nearby. Without a word, Muichiro grabbed a set of wooden swords and handed one to Takeo. He had brought 3 in total, 2 for Takeo. "You've started using dual blades?" Muichiro asked calmly as they prepared. Takeo nodded. "Yeah." "You've become a lot less talkative," Muichiro noted. "Yeah." "Where's the girl who was always following you?" Muichiro asked, continuing his questions. The fact that he even remembered her surprised Takeo. After all, Muichiro was known for his poor memory. But it didn't seem like a big deal. "Dead," Takeo replied calmly. "Oh. Muichiro acknowledged the answer with a simple sound, showing no further reaction. He stepped forward, raising the wooden sword with one hand and pointing it at Takeo. Takeo mirrored the gesture, standing opposite Muichiro as the two faced each other, red eyes and thin green pupils locked in place. Muichiro looked quietly at the boy in front of him, and, for once, memories from their first meeting surfaced clearly in his mind. Back then, the boy seemed more talkative, more confident. There was a normal smile on his face, and he was always accompanied by a girl loud, energetic, always by his side. Muichiro remembered her face and her name. He didn't remember her because she was particularly special. He remembered her, because he remembered Takeo. He shouldn't have cared, really. But that defeat from back then had remained buried somewhere deep in his mind. Perhaps it was because he couldn't accept his previous loss, or perhaps because he simply wanted to continue improving himself. Either way, Muichiro wanted to fight Takeo again. For him, whether he won or lost didn't matter. The very act of fighting would bring growth. However, looking into Takeo's dull, crimson eyes, Muichiro, for once, showed a rare trace of concern. "Are you, okay?" It was an awkward question, strangely phrased, yet somehow, Takeo understood exactly what he meant. Muichiro wasn't asking about his injuries. He was asking whether Takeo was in the right state of mind for a spar like this. Takeo inhaled deeply and exhaled slowly. Leaning his body forward, he gripped both swords, one in front, one behind, and slipped naturally into his breathing stance. His voice was steady. "I'm fine." "Then, shall we begin?" "All right." The moment the words left Takeo's mouth, a thin mist instantly rose around Muichiro. The fog veiled his figure completely, obscuring him from view. Then, without warning, without the slightest sign, Muichiro's blade pierced through the mist, stopping just a hair's breadth from Takeo's neck. Mist breathing, fourth form, shifting flow slash. A swift, decisive strike, Muichiro's signature quick kill technique. Takeo had seen him use it before. It was this very move that Muichiro had used to kill the hand demon in an instant. Compared to when they first met, Muichiro was now faster. His strikes were sharper, more precise, and carried significantly more weight behind them. He had grown stronger, much stronger. Stronger even than Takeo had been before inheriting 2B's abilities. If this had been the Takeo from before, even with his mastery of the Hinokami Kagura, he would have likely been killed instantly by Muichiro's first strike. But that was the past. Now overclock. A silent whisper echoed through Takeo's mind. Dumb. Instantly, the world around him lost all color. In this grayscale world, time itself seemed to slow. The invisible arc of Muichiro's sword became crystal clear to Takeo's eyes, its angle, speed, and trajectory all laid bare. In a flash, both of Takeo's swords shot upward. One wooden sword clashed against Muichiro's, locking it in place, while the other thrust toward Muichiro's chest like a streak of lightning. Wolf breathing, first form, wolf fang, modified. A variation of the standard wolf bite form, this version was designed for dual blades. One sword handled defense while the other delivered a relentless flurry of slashes aimed at the opponent's vital points. It was a form Takeo had refined himself after adopting a two-sword style perfect for simultaneous offense and defense. The wooden blades collided with sharp cracks. Despite the sudden counterattack, Muichiro's expression remained as calm and indifferent as ever. This might have been exactly what Muichiro expected. The mist thickened once again, and Takeo's sword sliced through it, seamlessly shifting into a new stance. Muichiro's figure vanished into the fog. When he reappeared, it seemed like he was far away, only to disappear again the very next second, his silhouette swallowed by the haze. Takeo couldn't see him. He couldn't track him. It was as if Muichiro's presence had merged completely with the mist, and every glimpse of him felt like a phantom, an illusion. But Takeo knew. He knew this wasn't magic, it was a manifestation of Michiro's sheer speed. Every flash of his figure was most likely a feint. That's why Takeo didn't strike recklessly. Instead, he activated overclock once more, his breaths turning into visible plumes of flame, flaring with heat and intensity. Mist breathing, seventh form wolf breathing, sixth form from within the swirling fog, a massive flaming wolf materialized, its body composed entirely of fire and wind. The blazing heat of the fire wolf surged outward, scattering the mist in a sudden explosion of heat, and there, Michiro's form was revealed. Blades hidden in the fog met flaming fangs mid-air as the two clashed. Michiro stepped forth, blade gleaming like silver silk, obscuring clouds. Flame wolf. As though whispered by the wind itself, both unleashed their strongest techniques simultaneously. Swoosh. Boom. In the next moment, the fog and the flaming wolf collided with a deafening bang. Ah, sparring, are they? Amidst the onlookers, a figure suddenly appeared beside Kyojuro and Jiyuo. It was as if she had materialized out of nowhere. Insect Hashira, Koko Shinobu. With her usual gentle smile, she looked toward the two figures locked in battle within the training grounds. It's good for them to spar, she said softly, but they should be careful not to go too far. If either of them gets injured, it'll be troublesome for me. As the head of the Butterfly Mansion, the Demon Slayer Corps' medical facility, Shinobu was not only a Hashira but also an exceptional pharmacist and healer. Medical treatment for injured demon slayers ultimately fell under her jurisdiction. In other words, if Takeo and Michiro ended up hurting themselves in this fight, the responsibility for patching them up would land squarely on her shoulders. Not that she minded, after all, both were the Corps' rising stars. Even though Takeo had declined the title of Hashira for now, it was clear to everyone that barring an untimely death it was only a matter of time before he officially took the position. At least half of the current Hashira already quietly acknowledged him as one of their own. Shinobu Koko was one of them. "Ha! You really are just a brat full of energy," came a loud, flamboyant voice as another figure arrived. "And your swordplay, it's downright flashy. Gorgeous, even. Not bad, not bad." It was Tenjin Uzui, the sound Hashira, the same Hashira who had found Takeo during his mission to eliminate the Shadow Demon. Standing at the edge of the field, Tenjin Uzui watched the two figures clashing in the center and commented with his signature flamboyant grin, "Truly gorgeous." Indeed, regardless of the actual destructive power, the sheer visual spectacle of fog and flames colliding was more than enough to be a feast for the eyes. But Shinobu Koko and Tenjin Uzui weren't the only ones drawn here. The love Hashira, Kenroji Mitsurai, had actually arrived earlier. She originally came intending to speak with Takeo, Kyojuro's protege and her fellow junior under the Flame Hashira. However, first Kyojuro, then Jiyuo, then Michiro all approached Takeo one after another, leaving her no chance to interrupt. Helplessly, she stood off to the side, nervously twisting her fingers, looking somewhat like a wronged child. It was as if someone had bullied her. High above her, perched on the trunk of a tree like a coiled serpent, was the snake Hashira, Iguro Obanai. His heterochromatic eyes, one yellow, one turquoise, watched the duel intently, as cold and sharp as a snake about to strike. Not far from him stood the wind Hashira, Sanamai Shinazugawa. Arms crossed, he grinned with that fierce, savage smile of his, looking every bit like a villainous thug rather than one of the pillars of humanity's last line of defense. In fact, with that face, you wouldn't be blamed for mistaking him for a villain. Without anyone noticing, nearly all the Hashira who had just finished the meeting had gathered here except for the stone Hashira, Chilmei Jima. Every one of them silently observed the two youths locked in combat in the field. They were assessing their strength, weighing their abilities, and further evaluating whether they were truly qualified to stand as Hashira. And judging from what they were witnessing. Swoosh. Whoosh. Boom. Slash. Boom. There was no doubt. Regardless of anything else, based on sheer skill and strength alone, both Takeo and Muichiro were more than qualified to become Hashira. Yet, completely unaware of the audience they'd drawn, the two in the middle of the battlefield remained utterly focused on each other. Neither paid any mind to what was happening around them. There was only each other in their eyes. After their strongest techniques collided and neutralized each other, both fighters staggered back, momentarily halting their assault. They adjusted their stances, facing each other once more. Muichiro quietly said, "You've gotten stronger." "The same goes for you," Takeo replied. Muichiro's pale green eyes narrowed slightly. "Your talent might actually be greater than mine, because my breathing technique isn't something I created myself." He continued in his usual calm tone. He had always believed that his strength was the result of inheriting the natural talent of his ancestors, an exceptional gift unmatched in this generation. But now, standing face to face with Takeo once again, Muichiro realized that the boy before him might possess a talent even greater than his own. Who else could develop an entirely new set of sword forms, a complete breathing style, in such a short time? The first 5 forms of Takeo's wolf breathing somewhat resembled wind breathing in sharpness and rhythm. But that 6th form, flame wolf, while visually reminiscent of flame breathing, upon closer inspection, was clearly distinct. The movement, the rhythm, the nature of the attack, it wasn't just different, it was entirely unique. It was a strange yet brilliant form of swordsmanship. What's more, not long ago, Takeo could only barely keep up with him in their sparring. Yet now, Takeo stood shoulder to shoulder with him, evenly matched. Muichiro was certain of one thing: Takeo's talent wasn't just real. It was extraordinary. Because even Muichiro himself had never once stopped growing, yet Takeo had closed the gap. No, he might have already surpassed him. "It doesn't matter," Takeo replied softly, his breathing steady. He recalled how he had sought out Muichiro back then because he wanted to develop his own breathing technique. Looking back now, he realized how naive that had been. In the end, whether it was an original breathing style or an inherited one, it didn't matter. As long as it could kill demons, the method didn't matter. He had simply been too fixated on the idea before. It felt a little late to come to that realization now. "Then, let's decide this with the final strike." Sensing that Takeo had no intention of continuing the conversation, Muichiro dropped the subject and spoke calmly. Takeo gave a small nod, a flicker of flame briefly flashing from his nostrils as he inhaled. The next moment both of them shot forward at the same time. Support and read 12 chapters ahead of WN at Patreon, Horny FBIO. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.